We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
I mean, what's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. I don't know if my cough ended up carrying through to the audio.
It's a very fuzzy gray area, that whole intro area, you know, where it fades in and we come in. So it was right on the border.
I usually cough my lungs out right before we get on the air and try to hide it. I don't know. Some may have blended right onto the show here today.
Could.
So I apologize if that's the case. But it's Mock Draft Monday. Happy Mock Draft Monday. We're live here on YouTube. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. And it's my mock today.
Yeah.
So you do one between now and the draft.
Maybe.
You should do one.
Yeah. I think I'm down somewhere in the schedule on the content, the written stuff. I have no idea when it is, though.
Yeah, so I've told our editing team, hey, I will write one, but I don't want to write it. So I'm going to have someone dictate my mock draft from here on the show onto the website.
Okay.
And there's a whole lot of caveats that I need to put up there right up front before we start.
Is this people have been asking in the chat for a model mock.
I can't give away the entire model. It's model influenced. It's model influenced.
Model adjacent.
Model adjacent, I would say. It's not, and the model is real. I have run numbers, and there are model percentiles, draft percentiles.
What's the Cliff Notes description of the model for people that are? People think it's just a joke.
It's not a joke, but I've taken a whole bunch of production-based variables and combine pro day variables and essentially map them to our wins above replacement metric.
Okay.
And done this at a position by position. And then essentially said, okay, what are the percentage chances, or that players within these percentiles actually hit, right, when they get to the NFL. So when I say, hey, this guy is on my don't draft or I'd let someone else draft him list, it's because the hit rate is marginal at best, like 0% to become elite or 7% to become solid, something like that.
0% is not very marginal. That's
nothing.
Yeah.
But again, that's where the risk appetite comes in. There's certain ways to slice and dice the data that says, if you look at certain things, you might be able to, become a high-end player, but it's risky.
You should feed this mock draft that you're going to get done today into ChatGPT and have it write a blurb for you for each person. See what comes out,
and fire that over to the editing team.
Mark, here's your mock draft. Have fun
through the stylings of PFF. Write this in the stylings of
Steve and the model
of PFF. Steve. So that's the model in a nutshell. The other part, and you'll hear me lament this as we get through the mock draft, there's a certain style that I would implement as general manager. And I don't think that this is my math, which is limited. I don't think this is my math being special or anything. I think there is a style where if you only drafted players, let's say 70th, 80th percentile in whatever ranking system you use, and you stick to this rubric, and you are not going to stray from that, I feel like your hit rate would go through the roof. And we did a show on this last year. I tested it. If I went back and used my model to draft or whatever, I would have added the most wins above replacement of any team since 2015. Just going through if I had pick 10 or pick 15 and just had 7 picks every single year, and it wasn't even close. And I don't think it's because the model itself is the thing. I think it's because not drafting for need, the way I tested it, not drafting for need and just sticking with the board. Look, so there's other variables in there, but that's the basic gist.
Okay.
Someone's asking production-based variables. It's a lot of the stuff we talk about, say pass rush grade, run defense grade, run stop percentage, completion percentage when targeting receivers. So each position has a whole bunch of different numbers, and I just looked at how well they project to WAR at the next level. And I used WAR because WAR leads to wins. More WAR equals more wins at the NFL level. That's what we've seen historically. So I think it's pretty good. It's being built in PFF IQ for our NFL team customers. So that's why I can't give all of it away, but we're model adjacent here as we go through the mock.
Okay.
So I don't want to talk the whole show, though. I
No.
want you to criticize,
Oh yeah,
critique.
I'll have complaints.
You'll have complaints. So we'll get to it in a minute. But first, I should have it memorized. You know what we're doing. The PFF NFL podcast and Steve's mock draft is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. I wonder if they'll sponsor my actual mock draft directly. Western and
model.
Southern. Or the model.
Power the entire model.
Yeah, Western and Southern can power the model. They could do that. While you focus on your roster moves and Steve's mock draft here, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. A couple more quick housekeeping items. We do have 2 interviews locked in that I teased last week. You said, don't do it till you get them locked in. Mm-hmm. Locked in.
Jim
Jim
locked
Nagy.
in, have yet to take place. I mean, this is a critical detail.
Have yet to take place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this Wednesday, we'll have Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. Fire over any questions you might have for Jim, particularly about the seniors. And then Dane Brugler of The Athletic, he'll be with us next Thursday on our show.
Someone in the chat is claiming that the late Dr. Eric Eager has a 37-inch vertical, and he can dunk. Now, he can dunk. I've seen that. But
There's no 37-inch
no.
vertical.
No.
I peaked at a 32-inch vertical using the same technology that they use at the combine.
Yes.
Because we've also used like the mat that
You might have
calculates how long you're in the air, and
might
those
have
numbers are lower.
You might have a 32-centimeter vertical now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
My kids are creeping up on me, and they can barely get off the ground. So, yeah, we're close here.
Yeah. I don't imagine.
That's what you pulled out of the chat?
Yeah. I mean, there's a string of them, you know?
There's no way Eric has a 37-inch vertical.
Not a chance in hell.
Like currently or one time when he was a college tight end?
I'd
Because
be
either one.
right. I'd be pretty stunned if he ever had a 37-inch vertical. He 100% does not have one now.
All right, we ready to get into this?
Yeah. Like, I mean, we're in this world of never speak in absolutes because it's draft season. I will absolutely, categorically put anything on the line to say that that man does not have a 37-inch vertical at the current time.
All right, let me throw my last caveat on the mock draft here.
Okay.
I always have, since I took over as our draft guy in 2014, 15, whatever that was, I have always done mock drafts based off what I would do. I don't even think I've ever done a predictive mock draft. So I've never tried to predict what teams are going to do. I've always done, Steve's the GM, all 32 teams. I'm going to make my pick. So that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is the websites that test your accuracy based off how well you predicted the first round. I have been accidentally placed into those competitions before. And it's me and Pete Prisco ranking last. Now, Pete, I think, was doing the same thing. Poor Pete's over there like, here's what I would do. And then they're like, dude, you only hit on 2 picks, you idiot. And I'm like, no, that's not, do not put me into any contests, mock draft, none of that stuff. I will not be entered into any mock draft accuracy contest because it's not what I'm doing. It's not what I'm doing.
Those are especially funny when it becomes known, like, you know, a few weeks in advance who the number 1 pick is going to be, and that, like, determines the dominoes all the way down.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I would go somewhere else with the number 1 overall pick because I'm GM. So from pick number 1, with every single domino, you're wrong.
Like, I'm purposely being wrong because I'm telling the people, here's what I would do. And look, some people hate this. Some people hate when you do here's what I would do. They just want to hear the best predictions. And I don't get it, but the point of this whole thing is to have a nice discussion about the best value and the best players and what you would do if you were in that seat.
The last thing we need to preface this with is we have heard your feedback, and we will spend less time on, the top 4 picks where we keep talking quarterbacks exhaustively.
We'll do quick quarterback takes.
Right, and get into some more substance.
Okay, the very last thing I want to say. Because I'm doing this, model adjacent. There's definitely a point in this draft where I don't want to pick any more players in the first round, and I would trade down. I would try to do everything I could to trade down. So because it's all the players that I like, theoretically, I'm going to run out of players that I like picking in the first round. There's probably only 15 players that I want to take in the first round. So there's another 15 who look like they're going to get drafted way higher than they should that I probably wouldn't necessarily take there because I'd have some of my other players available that I already picked. So, yeah, I'll just repeat that every single time I pick a guy. I don't love this guy in the first, but here we are taking him in the first round.
Perfect.
All right, you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, let's fire up the mock draft simulator. We're going to use the consensus board, that's the public board, as our baseline. And let's get right into it. Carolina Panthers are on the clock. Steve's mock draft 1.0.
PFF.com/mock.
There you go.
Where you can do your own.
I'm taking Bryce Young for the Panthers.
Okay.
No big surprise, right? Let's just talk picks 1 and 2 really quick. I'll take Bryce Young for the Panthers, and I'll take C.J. Stroud for the Texans.
And this is the order that the model would have them? Based on current limitations?
I am less inclined to use the model for quarterbacks. But yes, Bryce Young would be – they're both close, actually. The model is predominantly for non-quarterback positions. We haven't found a great trend at quarterback, and my theory there is just draft them anyway.
So, I've talked, my opinion on Bryce Young extensively. I think he should be the number 1 overall pick. Give me your sales pitch. What's the thing that puts him over the top for you?
Bryce Young?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of the same stuff you said. I mean, makes all the throws. To me, the thing that puts him over the top is natural playmaking. I thought we got a lot of good feedback on the Chris Sims discussion.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun talking to Chris, right? You get his takes and you get and there was a lot of stuff we agreed upon, right? It's like, yes, I did. Chris, when I mentioned that about Bryce Young, he said, yes, I did see that on film, right? It's just a matter of how you value those things. So I think Bryce Young's natural playmaking ability, in addition to be able to work within structure, I think that separates him from Stroud and from Richardson and the other guys.
And interestingly, something that Chris said sent me back and started watching some of Bryce Young. You can find the area that he struggles with the height. The stuff Chris talked about, which is when the pocket is kind of collapsing in around him, and all of a sudden being 5'10" becomes a reality because the things closing in around you are 6'3", and you just don't have anywhere to go. You know what I mean? You can see him start to struggle relatively in those situations. However, the point I would make to that is I think that's a pretty crappy baseline of quarterback play generally. Like, if you're in a situation where you're trapped in the pocket and the walls are closing in around you, pretty much every quarterback in the league plays like crap.
That's a good point.
Now, you're going to find, as Chris talked about, there's a play where Tom Brady or Justin Herbert or whoever, like, they deliver a strike from in there and, being 6'5" is useful. I would still suggest that their baseline in those situations, I didn't actually check it for the NFL guys, but like all of the college guys suck in that scenario. You can sort of filter it out and find those plays. So is Bryce Young's play a lot worse in those situations? Yes. Is everybody else's play a lot worse in those situations? Also, yes. And I also think that Young is probably the best of any of them, maybe Richardson, at not being in those situations. Like, he understands when the things are collapsing and gets out of there, so it's less of a problem for him. So it's another sort of area where it's exactly what you talked about. We're all seeing the same thing, but it's how much do you weight it. Like, Chris sees that and goes, oh, that's a problem. That's 5'10", biting you in the ass right there. Whereas if you start sort of diving into it and try and figure out, okay, well, how big a problem is that going to be? It's probably a lot smaller than you think it will be.
Yeah, I think that's a good point on all that. And, I trust Bryce Young the most, even though when we ranked them a couple weeks ago, I don't think he's in the top tier of quarterback prospect over the last few years. I think next year, I mean, the more I watch film on other guys and I see Caleb Williams making plays, man, he is legit. I think the hype's going to be real there. So I feel better about picking number 1 overall next year. As of right now, I know that gets said a lot, but for now, if I'm the Panthers, I would take Bryce Young. The Texans at 2, when we did our quarterback ranking show, I put Stroud and Anthony Richardson. I put those guys at 2A and 2B. And I said a little bit is going to be system, a little bit is going to be your risk appetite, I think for me as the Texans GM right now, knowing that my friend Bobby Slowick is running the offense and bringing Shanahan's scheme and all that stuff, I like Stroud the best there. I think his accuracy will play. I think his strengths can be accentuated in that offense. The concerns that you lay out about Bryce Young, I have those same concerns about CJ Stroud, but it's results based, not height based, right? When the pocket's closing in on Stroud, I don't think he's great under pressure except the Georgia game. So
I'd be interested to hear when this would presumably have to be entirely off the record, but how both D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick view Anthony Richardson based off the experience they had of the whole Kyle Shanahan, Trey Lance thing. Let's go aggressively. We get Trey Lance. This guy has this rushing threat that brings something totally different to the offense. He's also one of the least accurate quarterbacks that's come into the league based off sort of overall numbers in recent years. And the whole thing didn't work. And all of a sudden, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, is their starting quarterback with no elbow. Do they look at that and go, do they still buy into whatever caused Shanahan to go get Trey Lance in the first place? So, is their natural inclination to go, wow, Anthony Richardson could be Trey Lance, like the guy we thought Trey Lance was going to be? Or are they burned by how badly that went for a year or two, and they go, no, give me the safe guy. Like, give me the guy that we don't have to think about. Can he actually pass?
I'm assuming, we've kind of projected that on them, that was their explanation for getting Trey Lance. Right. We haven't heard specifically in those terms, right? But we've projected and theorized the reason why you go Trey Lance is to add that running threat, is because, hey, accuracy issues get mitigated because we're going to scheme it open. We create more open throws than any other scheme in the NFL. So we're going to handle that. And then Trey Lance is going to bring this dynamic playmaking ability that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't do, that Matt Ryan couldn't, nobody could for Kyle Shanahan since RG3 back in 2012. That would be the theory behind getting Anthony Richardson, but I think there's a probably safer play for the Texans in CJ Stroud here.
All right, that's already too much quarterback talk.
No, that was good. I think that was concise. I think that was right. We'd be an hour in normally on the quarterbacks. So that puts the Cardinals up at pick 3. And, of course, for me, the best play would be a trade down here. I'd rather have more picks if I'm the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not going to do any trades in this mock draft. So I'm taking Will Anderson. Jalen Carter, if you guys can see the screen there, Jalen Carter is higher on the consensus board, the public board, as we call it on the PFF mock draft simulator. For me, I feel like Will Anderson is the safest non-quarterback here, and by safest I mean the best. The one that I trust the most to be a good player at the next level. It fits a need for Arizona. They need any sort of defensive line playmakers, so I'm going Will Anderson from Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if they're stuck with that pick and they can't trade out, then this is the obvious call.
With Anderson, we said a lot last year that Aiden Hutchinson is not at a Bosa or Myles Garrett or even Chase Young level of prospect. I think those are the 4 who are the pinnacle of edge defender prospects of the PFF era. If you PFF college era starts in 2014. Prior to that, I think you would say Khalil Mack and you would say Von Miller. And I don't know if we would have Jadeveon Clowney in that same boat, but let's say those types of guys, right? Will Anderson might be a tick below. But again, when I look at the production metrics that project at the next level and everything that he's done, it's good. I think he's Aiden Hutchinson level, which is, we just saw Aiden Hutchinson looks like he's on his way to becoming just a very good edge in this league, even if he's not at Bosa level. But he could still, but that last 10-game stretch that Hutchinson had. So I feel good about Will Anderson.
Yeah, Anderson is hurt a little bit, I think, by his own reputation preceding him a little bit, in that I think very early in his college career, he started to get the treatment that you get when you're the top defensive player in the nation type of thing. And so you look at his there's a lot of his production ends up coming on like stunts inside and that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of it is because Alabama had to resort quite early on to trying to free him up, as opposed to just saying, you're on the edge, go beat your tackle. Because he doesn't just have to beat his tackle, he has to beat his tackle and the extra help. I think Anderson maybe could have had a sort of better, it's not like he had a bad college career, but like could have had crazy numbers, insane production if he wasn't getting extra attention, through the entirety of his college career.
All right, good points. I'll take Anderson at 3. And number 4, the Colts are up on the board. There's no other trades going on here. I'm taking Anthony Richardson at quarterback for the Colts. So, like I said earlier, Stroud 2A and 2B, him and Richardson, I had them tied for second. If I'm the Colts, I need to take a shot on one of the quarterbacks. I'm a little bit lower on Will Levis, maybe than others. He might drop in this one. We'll talk about it maybe when we get to the next quarterback potential selections here. I think Richardson's worth the play here. Go back and listen to many of my Anthony Richardson takes. We've had those on social media. We've had them among our other shows. I thought we got in depth way back when we did the Fixing Every Team in 5 Minutes episode on the AFC West. If you go back to that episode, went during the Raiders section, kind of went to town on Anthony Richardson discussion. Also in our QB rankings show, we talked about Richardson quite a bit, talked about his accuracy a couple shows ago. So without rehashing all of that, take the shot, man, if you're the Colts. There's no other position that's worth taking. There's rumors about them trading down and taking different quarterbacks, whatever it might be. Just
Hendon Hooker.
Take a quarterback and see if he's your guy. If he's not, you move on, but take a shot here with the Richardson at 4.
You're not at all persuaded, well, I suppose you're not trading in this, but persuaded by the argument of trade down and grab a Hendon Hooker?
I wouldn't. I mean, I've made the point that maybe teams should do that, right? Like you should play to the uncertainty at the quarterback position and say, I don't really know if Anthony Richardson's better than Hendon Hooker. We're not great at this. Let's trade down and you can maybe get another starter plus Hendon Hooker, right? So that would be the debate. Let's just pretend. What if I could add another starter to my team at whatever position and have Hendon Hooker versus having just one Anthony Richardson? I mean, I would entertain it, but I would probably stick with, I think there's a clear top 3 quarterback prospect here. Give me one of those guys, and I can accumulate more picks later in the draft through other wheeling and dealing. So if I'm the Colts, and this is the way the board falls, give me Anthony Richardson and, see if we can turn him into something.
There's still something, I think, to that old Bill Parcells planet theory. There's only so many human beings this big, fast, and whatever walking the planet, and Richardson is in that category. Like, he had the number 1 relative athletic score of all quarterbacks since 1987. Number 1. It's like almost 1,000 quarterbacks. So he's essentially the most athletic quarterback that's come into the NFL in the modern era. He's also got the number 3 highest relative athletic score at any position during that period. And the other 2 guys, who's the third guy? But one of them was Megatron. Like, Megatron, the guy's named after a Transformer. And maybe it was Vernon Davis was the other one, but like some other, all-time. Oh, no, Jordan Davis was the other one. Like, at 348 pounds is running a 4.7. Like, those are the category of freak that Anthony Richardson is in terms of physical tools. So does he have a long way to go as a passing quarterback? Sure. Is he the most freaky athlete to come into the league at that position since it's been relevant as, modern NFL? Also, yes. So at some point, you have to just say, screw it, let's figure out what we can turn this guy into. And
it's not just testing, right? I mean, it shows up on the field. It showed up on the field at Florida, either with long runs or his ability to run through tackles, around tacklers. So, yes, we're going to tap into Anthony Richardson's skill set in Indianapolis and build the offense around him and see what happens.
Okay.
With him and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, right? Good running backs feel better to me when you have a good running quarterback next to him, right? I'm more likely to say, I'm excited about Jonathan Taylor because Anthony Richardson's back there with him. So I think there are some nice things that Indianapolis could do there.
Yeah, and the chat is pointing out that, we've seen freak combine or athletes bust in the past. I would make the argument, and this is a worse argument now than it was a year ago, but it's the same as the Trayvon Walker thing. We've literally never seen a player that freaky bust because there's never been a player that freaky bust. There's never been a player that freaky, period. Like, Trayvon Walker was not just another Donnell Hunter or Vernon Golson or whoever you want to compare him to in terms of freaky workout numbers. He set literally unprecedented numbers. We have never seen anybody this crazy enter the league. So you can't comp him to anything else that's bust before because it's never existed. I would say Richardson is in that. I mean, he is in that category. He's literally the most athletic quarterback for his size that has ever entered the league. So any precedent is off the table because nobody has ever come into the league looking like that. Like, it's a one of one. So Have previously athletic players looked great in shorts and busted? Absolutely. But again, never seen this before because it's never happened before.
And let me just say this as concisely as I can. That's not the only, I mean, that's part of the reason why you want to take him. The reason why I'm taking quarterback here is because even if there's bust potential, there's always bust potential. There was bust potential with Andrew Luck and with Trevor Lawrence. We just felt like, hey, it's lower, right?
Right.
The value of hitting on a quarterback is unbalanced with the value of hitting on every other non-quarterback. The next players on the board, Jalen Carter, Devin Witherspoon, Tyree Wilson, Quentin Johnston. Those guys don't matter. If you're Jim Irsay, owner of the Colts, or you're Chris Ballard, GM of the Colts, does it matter if you got a very good Jalen Carter if you don't have a quarterback? If you got a very good Devin Witherspoon, Tyree Wilson, any of those players, if you get any of those players and they hit, even become Pro Bowlers, even if they become All-Pro, it doesn't matter until you have a quarterback. And then if your quarterback doesn't hit, what did you leave on the table? You left on the table a starter, a good player. You left on the table a Jalen Carter to take a shot at a quarterback to see if he's the guy. And then if 2 years down the road he's not the guy, you move on to the next guy. The Jets organization has not taken a step back because they missed on Zach Wilson, right? They would have rather hit on Zach Wilson. They would have rather hit on the quarterback, but the sky is not falling in New York. They move on to the next guy, right? And the only thing they missed out on was, well, in that draft, okay, maybe they missed out on Jamar Chase or Micah Parsons and a very good player. But most drafts aren't like that. You take your shot at quarterback, and it does not crush your franchise. So that's why you do that, even if there's bust potential. There's bust potential all the time at quarterback. All right, moving on. Seattle Seahawks are up at 5, and I'm going Jalen Carter here, defensive tackle from Georgia. Again, we always preface this with we don't know some of the stuff that's going off the field. To me, the on-field tape is going to trump everything, assuming all character issues. My team has signed off on him from a character standpoint. Okay, let's pretend that's the case. I think Will Anderson's the safest non-quarterback. I think Jalen Carter on the field is second. And then I think we get into a whole bunch of toss-ups. I think there's far more risk from an on-field production standpoint with almost every other player in the draft.
Yeah.
So that's where I would take Jalen Carter, assuming all checks out, and I'm excited if I'm the Seahawks.
Yeah, this is the spot in the draft where it gets difficult, where you've cleared, most of the quarterbacks. If you assume one starts to drop, it's because you don't love that quarterback as much as the kind of consensus or whatever did. And then however many blue chips you think are in this, whether it's Will Anderson 1, whether it's Anderson and Jalen Carter 2, if those guys are gone, we're in this world of like, I don't love any of these guys worth a top 10 pick that are available, but I have a top 10 pick and I'm on the clock. So I got to pick somebody. Carter is like, yeah, he's in this category. He's arguably the number one player in the entire draft from a talent standpoint. But we're dealing with, the arrest, the warrants, the pro day stuff, like who knows? So you're right. If that stuff checks out, if you're comfortable that you can bring him in, it was a moment of immaturity or whatever, and in your environment, he's going to work out great, then absolutely, this is value and it's the only pick you can possibly make. And if you don't love that, you're in a really tough spot because you're not drafting I doubt you're drafting Will Levis if you're Seattle. And then you're like, do I love any of the corners at this spot? Do I love Tyree Wilson? And we don't. Do I love any of the receivers? Like this is not a nice draft spot. And this is applicable to Seattle at 5, to Detroit at 6, probably to the Raiders at 7. Like this is a rough period of this draft if it falls a certain way.
I want to put some perspective in here now. So the Lions are up on the clock at 6, and I mention this every single year. There's a pivot point in the draft, right? I think we've hit it.
Yeah.
This is where the next, everybody else on the board, I would rather pick at 12 to 15, right? That I would rather not have a pick until 12. I would feel much better with these next players picking them at 12, picking them at 13, whatever it might be. For perspective, I think we said in 2021, just 2 years ago, the pivot point in that draft was probably pick 7 or 8. And now in hindsight, when you look at the blue chip players that were drafted there, Kyle Pitts at 4, still think he's a blue chip player and prospect. Jamar Chase at 5, Jalen Waddle at 6. Penei Sewell went 7. J.C. Horn went 8. Patrick Surtain went 9 to the Broncos. Devontae Smith went 10 to the Eagles. Then Fields at quarterback. And then Micah Parsons goes 12 to the Cowboys. Any of those players I would take over this next slew of players. I think all of those guys are better prospects than the next however many players on the board here.
I mean, if the board falls this way, the entire second half of the top 10 is desperately hoping that somebody loves Will Levis to the point where, all of a sudden there's a team, maybe Tampa Bay, right? Where are they? 19. A team like Tampa Bay at 19 or Washington at 16 or, whoever. That there's a team in that area that didn't think that they were going to have a shot at a Will Levis, all of a sudden is like, oh, Will Levis is slipping. We're now at sort of pick 7 or 6, 7, 8, 9, and they go and do that aggressive move of jumping up to grab the guy that they didn't think was going to be available. If that doesn't happen, all of these teams are in this spot of having to draft the guy that they just almost certainly don't think is worth this spot, that they would rather have 10 picks lower down.
Yeah, so this is why I hate my mock draft. I hate doing it. I don't want to do it. I pick all my favorite players, and all my favorite players are gone, but I'm still obligated by the rules of the exercise to make picks.
Well, now you got to be the Raiders. Now you got to reach.
You might think I'm reaching a couple times. So full disclosure, I kind of went through this in my head ahead of time. It's live, but I tried to have an idea just to make sure I'm not completely off the cuff here. Let me get to the Lions here at 6. So I'm going to go Devin Witherspoon, Illinois cornerback here at 6. Again, I would rather take Witherspoon in the teens, but here we are. We're picking at 6. The consensus board has him at 7, so I'm not straying far from what the public, or in the public being, just online analysts, several of them. But Devin Witherspoon at 6. I think his season last year was spectacular for Illinois. I absolutely love watching him play. He flies around the field like a missile. When people are always looking for Dan Campbell types, he's his type, right? The dude is feisty and just does awesome stuff on the field. My concern, what the data would be concerned with, is there's only 1 year of production from Witherspoon. He had multiple years of play at Illinois where he was just average. Last year, he was the best corner in college football. So how do you weigh that? I like to look historically and say, okay, how often has this happened? The hit rate on those types of players isn't great. So that's where, again, if I'm in the draft room, I would mitigate risk and try to take him a little bit lower. What are you smiling about? What's going on?
Just that before we went on air, I showed you that the Endeavor has purchased WWE and is now going to combine somehow WWE and UFC into one parent company for purposes beyond my understanding.
It's going to be some great crossover matches.
But that publicly traded company is now going to be trading under the symbol TKO, which I just think is very good.
Smart. That's great.
Yeah.
If they can mix boxing in, we could really buy the WBF.
And Dana's Slap League, the whole thing. It's just your one-stop
Dana
shop
does
for
the Slap League.
Yeah. It's your one-stop shop for fighting.
Think I could make it in the Slap League? I won the tortilla challenge we did last summer.
The weight that must be behind one of your ham hock hands.
Yeah.
Just physics alone dictates that nobody's getting up from that.
It's funny because most people think you insult me, but every now and again, you compliment me and think, wow, this guy could do any sort of athletic endeavor.
Now, I got to confess, I've never actually watched a minute of that Slap League thing. I don't know how the process works.
I saw some highlights. It looks terrible.
Oh, yeah. But my point being, if you have to slap second, you might be in trouble. I don't know what your chin is like, but I'm just saying.
No, rough chin. You had a rough
when
chin.
that meat hook of a hand connects with somebody's face, they're going down. They're not coming up. Now, if they've already had a shot at you, you might be struggling.
Yeah. So we're not going to do that. So I'm going Devin Witherspoon at 6 for the Lions.
Now, explain to me, so Devin Witherspoon would seem to fall into the category of one-season wonder that you warned me away from recently with your historical research.
Yes.
And yet, here you are at pick number 6, drafting him.
Yeah. So the cornerback position is kind of like quarterback, where I think there's inherent risk anyway.
Yeah.
Unless you have, I think when the clear-cut elite prospects are out there.
Have you seen a list, by the way? Forget one-season wonder. Have you seen sort of the last 10 years of simply who was the number 1 corner drafted that year?
Well, I imagine it goes Stingley, J.C. Horn, Jeffrey Okudah.
Yeah.
None of those look great compared to the one after him.
Right. I mean, very rarely is it the best corner in that draft, even containing yourself just to the first round picks of corner. Like, it's those
misses were all non-model guys, by the way.
Oh, wow.
The model liked Patrick Surtain as elite, Sauce Gardner as elite, and it said A.J. Terrell was the best corner in the draft. Where
Really?
So no, it would have gone A.J. Terrell over Jeffrey Okudah and C.J. Henderson in that draft. Actually, Okudah was close. Okudah and Terrell were close.
Yeah.
Okudah's just a straight-up miss.
Right.
C.J. Henderson never would have been a first-rounder by the model. The biggest, as I've said, the biggest miss of my life in anything I've ever done is Vernon Hargreaves, though. Vernon Hargreaves ticked every box before he unticked them on his way to the NFL.
There are some
when he
players.
got to the NFL.
Yeah, there are some players where even, years later, with hindsight, it makes no sense. Why wasn't that guy good?
I don't know.
And he's one of them. Hargreaves is one of them. There are other players as well. But like a lot of times, a few years' time, with some hindsight and with some more information, you're like, okay, that makes sense. I understand why that guy wasn't a good player. Or, it turns out he had a drug habit, or he was a lazy bum, whatever. Like, you know things later on down the track. And you're like, okay, maybe we couldn't have avoided that at the time, but now we know. There are other players where you're like, I don't understand why that guy wasn't good. There's no reason for it even 10 years down the line.
If you want to talk corners a little bit, because I'm going to draft a few corners here in the next few picks, I believe. So if you use my rubric of what was a hit, which I went back and I said, okay, did this guy have a wins above average per season above, let's say the 60th percentile, 70th percentile? We'll call him a solid player. The first round since 2015 has seen a 45% hit rate on cornerbacks. So 45% of first-round corners have become hits. Just using the model would get you 57%. So you go from 45 to 57. So here's where it's interesting. Second-round corners, because when I was looking at my data, I was like, man, I'm terrible in the second round. The NFL is terrible in the second round. The hit rate on corners, using my rubric here, drops to 25%.
Yikes.
So do you remember how many times, and we're gonna rank corners later this week on Thursday, how many times have we looked at cornerbacks over the last couple of years and be like, I don't love him in the first, I would definitely take him in the second. There's a lot of those guys, like Kevin King. Like, there's a lot of these guys like, man, I would definitely take him in the second. As soon as that happens, the hit rate gets cut in half, basically.
It also probably explains why a lot of times watching corners, you really don't like a lot of these guys. And then you're like, what? They're supposedly top 50 players. They must be quite good. But if your hit rate, if your baseline hit rate for a guy drafted at like pick number 40 is 25%, you probably shouldn't love him.
Yeah. So that's what's interesting, right? So if I start saying I don't want this guy until the second, what do I do there? Do I just say, if the NFL values him as a second-round pick, I need to change my value expectations there, because that's generally not a good thing. The consensus is saying he's not good enough in round one. There's just not good value drafting corners in the second round. So the model also doesn't have good value in the second round. Third round, similar. Where it is interesting is the very few model players that make it to day 3 or undrafted free agency, the hit rate's pretty solid. Very small sample size, but you did find DJ Reed and Levi Wallace. There are some players in there that are pretty good. So I have some corners on my list that if they show up on day 3, I would play those odds and say, absolutely, rounds 4 through 7, I would draft 2 or 3 of these guys, and I might steal a player there. So the Devin Witherspoon thing is, the overall data likes him. When you look at it through the one lens of take his whole career, it still likes him. On the other hand, when I look at one-year wonders, the players who only had one big peak year are big misses. That's like the C.J. Hendersons and Damon Arnett's. There's a few others in there. The only guy that really hit was Marshawn Lattimore, and he just didn't have an opportunity to play.
Right.
Marshawn Lattimore, and there was one other player that hit. So, yeah.
Newsom.
I just want to say, Greg Newsom. So I just want to say there's risk associated with all these other picks. I don't love them all. That's why I would want to mitigate my risk by trading down, but I'm taking Devin Witherspoon 6 for the Lions. That puts the Raiders up at 7, and now this brings me to this this is another pivot point here. The Raiders and Falcons both need a quarterback, theoretically, right?
The Raiders desperately. I mean, the Falcons can probably muddle through with,
The Raiders desperate. Well, I think maybe I would say that the Falcons have a more desperate need at quarterback.
No.
So the Raiders at least have Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And I can paint a picture where if I create a pristine world around Jimmy Garoppolo for the next year or two, we're going to be competitive, right? I know my goal is to win championships, but we're going to be competitive. I could paint that picture. I think it's harder for the Falcons to do that. They're making some really good moves, and I still don't really know what Desmond Ridder is. They valued him as a third-round pick last year, and they're going all in on Desmond Ridder. And I didn't see enough last year to say, absolutely, I'm all in on Desmond Ridder. So the Raiders are so bad defensively, and I just don't love Will Levis enough. And I know I'll contradict myself a little bit here. You always take shots on quarterback or whatever, but I'm not going to do it in this case for the Raiders. So I'm going to say, let's create as good of a world around Jimmy Garoppolo for now. I could still draft a quarterback next year if I have to. I don't have to do it right now because I'm at least tied to Garoppolo for another year. I don't love Levis enough to do it, so I'm going to take Christian Gonzalez at corner from Oregon. The data doesn't love Christian Gonzalez, except from a measurable standpoint.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a shot on the 90th percentile measurables that I'm seeing in the model, and I'm going to take Gonzalez for the Raiders here. Also, theory-wise, I mean, I'm trying to make my pass game better. I want to be good in the run game. I'm trying to make my pass game better in all of these picks. So this is how I'm doing it.
Okay. So Gonzalez is a guy who played in Colorado for a couple of years and then went to Oregon, where he had by far the best season of his career. And that really catapulted him into, this kind of conversation that he's in right now. The real big difference between his Colorado play and Oregon play, though, was he started to make some plays on the ball. He didn't have an interception at Colorado at all. And then all of a sudden added 4 of them in his year at Oregon. But his completion rate given up was actually 5 percentage points lower in Colorado than it was in Oregon. Passer rating was not dramatically worse either way. The big difference is he's just made a few turnovers last season. But he's got that prototypical, size, length, but I've rarely seen an athlete move as smoothly as he did in everything he did at the combine. Not just the drills, but the 40 times just looked effortless, looked like he was jogging. Every movement drill he did was that is the fluidity everybody is looking for at cornerback. That change of direction, that smooth ability to flip your hips, change direction, just adjust on the fly. That's everything people are chasing for. But you have to square that with, okay, but with those movement skills, why has he never been absolutely shut down? He gave up 3 touchdowns last season, gave up 3 touchdowns the year before that. Doesn't get penalized a lot, which is a good thing, but there is a sort of missing, top end to his play that you think a guy that freaky good should be able to bring out of the bag at the very minimum at the college level. Yeah.
We'll get into all the corner analysis this week. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, Gonzalez, like I said, from a production standpoint, solid. He's not a no draft. He's probably, again, I would rather take him lower in the draft. This is where I think positional value is going to play a little bit for me. So I'm going to bump up some of the receivers and corners, tackles that either positions that are hard to come by or positions that I need to win. Right? And the Raiders have a massive need at corner. I'm not need-based drafting, but I'm drafting a player who's going to come in and have a chance to play. You mentioned the movement skills, plus vertical and broad, 4.38 40. All of those things project well to a production standpoint, so that might offset the actual on-field production a little bit. So all of those things are going through my head, but I'm going Christian Gonzalez here.
How much, so between the model, between the top corner drafted every year, all the things we're talking about, the risk associated with corner, we know how valuable corners are. Where do you find the balance between this seems to be a risky as hell position to draft, period, and it's also a really valuable position to draft? If we hit on a Sauce Gardner, the entire defense changes, right?
Yeah.
But what are your chances of hitting on a Sauce Gardner with what was effectively a 50-50 proposition? the Texans get a guy who hasn't shown anything yet, and the Jets get an all-pro to transform the defense. Like, what do you do?
My risk appetite would be to take those chances. I think if I hit on a Tyree Wilson at edge, I know that sounds counterintuitive. I don't think the impact is as great as hitting on a corner. I think the Sauce Gardner thing was huge last year. So last year at this time, a lot of mock drafts had the Jets not only taking an edge, but taking Jermaine Johnson, who they ended up getting in the 20s, right? They traded back into the 20s to get him. And a lot of the discussion was, you have to go edge. You have to go defensive line. Robert Saleh builds through the defensive line. Now, I don't think they made a tactical decision to go, we're going corner over edge. I think they really did the scouty, trust your board, and they just graded Sauce Gardner so high that he was above all the other defensive linemen, besides probably Aiden Hutchinson, right? So they draft Sauce Gardner, the Jets. He did transform their defense. Yeah. The way he played last year turned their defense from one of the worst to one of the best. Other stuff happened too, but Sauce was the driver. I don't think an edge defender does that, right? The value in drafting an edge defender is certainty. So that is what you're balancing, right? It's like working the stock market or anything like that. I'm going to either pay for upside at corner or certainty on the defensive line. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a case-by-case basis here, right? But the Raiders in particular, I don't think the Raiders can be good in that division if they don't have good corners, right? They just can't be good. You cannot compete with the Chiefs and the Chargers in particular, and maybe now the Broncos, if you can't cover, if you're not good at corner. You can't. So you got to take some chances there if you're the Raiders. So that's all going through my head, and that's all going through my head when I'm saying no to Will Levis if I'm the Raiders. All right, Falcons at 8. I probably should go Levis here, but I'm not going to do it because it's my mock draft, and it's fun, and I can not do that. I can veer a little bit here. So I'm not going to go Will Levis. Maybe I'm in on Hendon Hooker in the second if I'm the Falcons. Maybe I'm in on Hooker later. Maybe I'd rather have Hooker instead later than Levis in the first. Could be the case.
Wow.
So this is where the people are going to be like, what's going on here? Ready for the consensus board? What we have left here: Will Levis.
Yeah.
Tyree Wilson, edge from Texas Tech. Quentin Johnston from TCU. Then Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State. That's what's up next here on the board. I'm going with my guy, Brian Branch. Safety, nickel, hybrid. I'm taking him at 8 overall for the Atlanta Falcons.
That's a very on-brand pick for Steve Palazzolo, GM.
It's my type.
Yeah.
I have a type. I have a type. So would you criticize me? So you're live. You're live on YouTube. PFF Draft Show. I run the card up for Brian Branch at 8. And what's your reaction? You and Chris and Trev, you guys are all like, man, Steve just left PFF. He goes to the Falcons to be GM.
Right.
And this is his first pick.
Yeah. The late Steve Palazzolo.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, like I would echo what I said 2 picks earlier, that I think this run is a difficult spot to be in, where you don't love, all the sort of blue chip certain players that you think are going to be great are gone, and or the quarterbacks. The only quarterback, if I'm Atlanta, that I'm really, really interested in is Richardson. If Richardson is there, I want him in this offense, and I just want to see that. If Richardson isn't there, I won't say any of the 3, because if somehow Bryce Young is sitting there at 8, I want that as well, but for different reasons. But I wouldn't love sticking C.J. Stroud in this offense necessarily. I wouldn't love Will Levis sitting in this offense necessarily. Not that I think they'd be bad, but I think Atlanta is fine with seeing what Ritter can do this year, and then if he stinks, figuring it out next year in some capacity. Or, by the way, the Lamar Jackson thing, I think, is still alive for Atlanta. Like, if they come out of this draft, Richardson doesn't slide to them, they don't love any of the other guys, it falls like this. They go a different position with their top 10 pick. They still have both the salary cap space, the time, and the draft picks to go after Lamar Jackson in the offseason and still have that installed, much as they might suggest that that's not happening right now. So I don't think that's dead. But if this is how it falls, I really don't love their options. So, yeah, like, would I have gone Brian Branch? No, probably not. But I wouldn't go to war fighting for here's the obvious alternative that you should have gone with. Because everyone else will be saying, oh, Tyree Wilson is the jackpot pick. I don't like Tyree Wilson. I really don't understand the hype for him. And I would be 10, 20 spots lower on him than the consensus board. So
I have a feeling maybe the NFL is as well.
Maybe.
That Tyree Wilson is maybe a product of media hype.
Yes.
Looks a little bit like Trayvon Walker from last year. But he hasn't worked out all offseason. He's got the broken foot. He doesn't even have a chance to put those workout numbers that people expect out there.
Right.
We'll talk about Tyree Wilson when we get there.
Yeah. So I mean, there are going to be people who would say, "Well, that's your obvious alternative." I don't think that's a better alternative, to be honest. So with that, you're saying, well, do I want to take the first wide receiver off the board? You've already got Drake London. You've already got Kyle Pitts. You're already kind of not struggling to figure out how that group goes together, but I'm not sure that wide receiver moves the needle for this team as much as it would for others. You retained the 2/5 of your offensive line or 1/5 that was headed for free agency and another that you needed to lock up. So you're probably not in the offensive line market. Would you reach this much for a Kalijah Kancey? I'd entertain the argument, but all of a sudden you're actually relatively well stocked for penetrating, pass rushing interior linemen, right?
I was wondering about the redundancy of Grady Jarrett and Kalijah Kancey.
Yeah.
I don't think Kancey plays nose tackle at the NFL level. I think he's got to play over the guard. Grady Jarrett has shown he can play nose and move around a little bit.
You can also argue there's a sort of, here's Grady Jarrett's, successor, like heir apparent or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe, but I can definitely see why you would be looking at that if you're Atlanta and saying, it doesn't really fit. There's places they could go, but I can't find an obvious, here's what I would do, idiot. So I don't think I would hammer the pick in my live reaction to GM Palazzolo's first move.
I would text you too, Sam, in your live reaction, please know we tried to trade down. We liked Brian Branch. We like Brian Branch a lot. He's the top player on our board. I'll tell that to the media, but I'm going to tell you, I wanted him at 15, right? I wanted to trade. I love Brian Branch at 15, not 8.
And then I can drop, sources say.
Sources say that Atlanta tried to trade down, but they got their guy. I got to be confident. You got to make the people feel good. You got to make the players feel good.
An anonymous source sitting in a broken chair.
The Falcons did a couple things over the last couple of weeks that I would do, by the way. Steve would do this all the time. Signed Mac Hollins, right? Gotta love Mac Hollins.
Okay.
So you signed him, and they signed Scotty Miller, right? Not specifically Scotty, but your undersized, pure run deep stuff.
He's
really fast.
He's in your category of always draft or always sign.
Even like a buy low on Jonnu Smith as a pass catching tight end. So that's part of the reason why I didn't go receiver either. Not that need based drafting, whatever. They already have Drake London and Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller and Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts. They already have a lot of types over there. So I'm going to go Brian Branch, and I kind of like adding him to this secondary that currently has A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward playing outside at corner. They add Jesse Bates as your pure free safety. Richie Grant is kind of a hybrid type of safety slot player, much like Brian Branch. We're creating some flexibility there in the secondary.
Oh, I also think I suspect if Brian Branch is as good as people think he is, or specifically you think he is, we are probably way too low on where he should be drafted. Theoretically, if he's as good as he looks like he can be, and you showed me there's tape of him making incredible plays one-on-one against Zay Flowers, to break up passes, that kind of thing. Or was it Mingo in the end zone where he ends up shadowing him, making another great pass
Jonathan
breakup?
Mingo, your number 8 receiver. He's got a two-way go against Mingo, and boom, he just breaks on it and makes a great play.
If he's that good, everybody is way too low on what he can be, and there's probably only 2 or 3 defenses in the NFL that he doesn't upgrade. So it's absolutely worth a top 10 pick at that point.
Yeah, listen, Dave, in the chat, it's not being lazy. I don't care how high the Falcons are on Richie Grant. They're all going to play. Teams play 3 safety systems. Plus, Brian Branch is going to be my starting nickel. He's taking over from Mike Hughes as the nickel. D. Alford, he's better than those guys. He's going to play nickel, and we're going to have versatility. He's going to do whatever I want game plan-wise. This isn't a knock on Richie Grant. I don't care what the Falcons think about Richie Grant. I'm going full Mel right now. They're all going to play. All right? Versatility in the secondary to combat the versatility in the wide receiver cores around the NFL. Brian Branch, he's a top 5 non-quarterback in this draft from a value standpoint. I'm all for taking him at number 8. Let's move on. Number 9, Chicago Bears on the clock. We're not going to spend as much time on every pick because I've picked Peter Skoronski for them before. We've already broken that down. I'm taking Skoronski from Northwestern.
Okay.
Did I consider the receivers? Yeah, I've considered the receivers. But I think Skoronski is the safe play here.
Did you consider defensive line?
Not at this point. I don't like the defensive line. Kalijah Kancey maybe. I think Skoronski shoring up that offensive line is a bit more of a priority for me for the Bears. A little insurance for Whitehair if he needs to move around. But I like our starting 5 if we move some pieces around now.
What does the model think of Kancey?
High.
High.
Very high.
Okay.
Now, again, it depends on how you slice this. In isolation, very, very high. When you 90th percentile plus. However, I got to recheck some of these numbers. When you look at 90th percentile plus players who are at his size, right? Because there's an initial run where I don't factor in the size, right? So I just run the model and then go back and kind of like slice and dice it based off of types and sizes and all that stuff. It loved Ed Oliver, right? There's other players at that size that just did not pan out very well. So that would be there's caveats with all these guys. There's buyer beware pieces to all of these players.
So it's interesting. I'll just fire this to Tyler on the off chance he can fire on the screen quickly enough. But there's a website, Grinding the Mocks by Ben Robinson, that sort of tracks mock drafts and where guys' draft stock is essentially. And it felt to me like Kancey's stock has done this little, it went into overdrive, presumably around the combine, where he set, record-setting numbers, compared himself to Aaron Donald very favorably, and it felt like his stock was going through the roof. And then recently, it's like it's cooled off again. And maybe we haven't, I was getting ready to put him inside the top 10 happily. Like you can see that there. It was sort of, now it hasn't gone that high. If you look at that peak, it actually peaked just at the bottom of the first round and then started to go down.
Mel was the first guy to do it. Mel put him at 10. That's Kuiper, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, you can see
Mel put him at 10 to the Eagles at one point.
As much as the sort of mean or the whatever average there is fairly low at the bottom of the first round, you can see a bunch of mocks were there throwing him at the top, including a bunch of those blue ones, which are the sort of the quote-unquote expert ones. So there was a run where it felt like his stock was getting really hot and we were ready to put this guy in the top 10, but that feels like it's cooled off recently.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it has cooled a touch.
But I'm still buying it. Like I'm not, again, the Aaron Donald thing is silly, but the Ed Oliver comp is a more reasonable one where we are taking this guy with literally unparalleled get off from the defensive line, who I think has more pass rushing moves and ability to shed blocks than Oliver did at the same time. That's worth a top 10 pick. Like that's a disruptor.
Yeah, and again, the problem is like, what else is around? Like, what are you competing with? I don't love the rest of the players here. So part of the Skoronski thought process here, by the way, my numbers do like him quite a bit at tackle. The numbers don't. I'm not using like the arm length cutoff or whatever it is. So I think he could play guard. I think he could play tackle. Right? I would let him try both. If he fails at tackle, let him play guard. But I think there's a comfort level for me with Skoronski from a data perspective that I don't have with some of the other top tackles, even though I would still probably take them. So
because they could really use him being. I mean, so what does your line look like if you're Chicago? So
I got to fire up the depth chart, but we put
Braxton Jones at left tackle, presumably. Yes. Now you're theoretically they've got Cody Whitehair at guard or at center. Lucas Patrick is there as an option at center. Nate Davis, who they just brought in at guard.
I think the latest is they want to move
Tevin Jenkins being kicked back out to right tackle after being good at guard.
So we put in our depth chart, we put Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. I liked Jenkins as a tackle coming out. He played guard pretty well last year. I don't think they love him. I would give him a shot to play right tackle, or I would bring Skoronski in to take a shot to play right tackle. And then Jenkins, so moving Whitehair to center, I think makes sense. So now I'm filling left guard. Left guard can be the Skoronski or Tevin Jenkins, kind of whoever fails there goes to left guard. O-line people are going to hate this. We're moving positions, we're moving sides and all that stuff, but it's all doable. The best 5 play. And there you go.
Yeah.
The best 5 play. Or I grab a guard later.
I'd be kind of tempted to. So the problem with that is, so Braxton Jones, I think, stays at left tackle. All's fine. I'm fine with moving Cody Whitehair back into center. I think that's probably his best position. Nate Davis stays at right guard because that's where he played, and that's where you should probably keep him. At that point, you're kind of stuck with seeing if Tevin Jenkins can play right tackle because you've got 2 right guards. And then Skoronski comes in and plays left guard, like, right away. And then maybe if Braxton Jones doesn't improve next year, Skoronski, like, gets a shot to kick out the left tackle and actually play that after a year. But
yeah, we talk about all those options. They're all on the table. We'll make sure the best 5 play. But Skoronski is one of the best 5, and I think he can play three different positions there.
The move I don't love for them is, like, I think Tevin Jenkins looked like a very good right guard, and all of a sudden you sign a right guard in free agency to take that spot. Now you've kind of put yourself in a bind of somebody has to go play a position that they're probably not going to be as good at.
We can't undo the fact that they may have spent $10 million for a guard who's worse than the one that they already had. But we can't undo that. We are where we are with the Bears. All right, Eagles are up at 10, and this is where I'm going to take Kalijah Kancey. As far as the consensus board, Tyree Wilson's still up there. I'm dropping him, right? I'm just not going to take him as high as whatever the public says here. A couple of receivers are up there. Kancey's actually next. He's 5th on the consensus board right here. And I will take Kancey. So defensive line, there's now 2 defensive tackles that have gone in the top 10. It's Jalen Carter and Kalijah Kancey. Both guys, data's pretty strong on both of those guys. It's not as strong as others in the class. I think there's a drop-off at that position. Despite all the size and all that stuff, I think Kancey next to Jordan Davis and some of the other dudes that they have there in Philly, it's just another body type to try to block. It's probably unfair to say I love all these defensive linemen in Philly because I think they'll use them well or they'll be next to other good players, but that is a factor here with Kalijah Kancey. I think he'll be a good disruptor here for the Eagles.
Do they still have Linval on the roster? Because Linval Joseph lining up next to Kalijah Kancey would be the funniest, like, little and large image since the Derrick Henry standing next to Mark Ingram thing.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, these guys play the same position type of thing.
Theoretically,
these guys are both DIs, as we call them, D tackles at the NFL level.
I mean, Linval Joseph, his list weight is like 330, but he made Jordan Davis, whose list weight is who was at the combine at 348. He made Jordan Davis look small when they were lined up next to each other. Like, there were images of whether it was Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, whoever, Jordan Davis, and then Linval. And Linval Joseph was making those guys look tiny. So 330 is a list weight. If he's within 50 pounds of that, I'd be surprised. So putting him next to a dude who's like with 281, a defensive tackle, I just need to see that.
I love it. Get all the different body types. It's fantastic. Pass rush grade wise, Kancey's one of the best we've seen. He's right there when we talk about historic pass rush grades coming out of college on a per play basis here.
Yeah.
The top 2, by the way, both from Alabama, Christian Barmore and Quinnen Williams. As far as Power 5 guys, there's Maurice Hurst from Michigan, has not translated at that level. Jordan Elliott from Missouri has not translated at that. We'll say 2 of our bigger misses. Elliott has been a below-average player. Hurst has been an average player, but certainly not the impact player we said, had the heart issues, all that stuff. Next on the list, though, Chris Jones, obviously become a star. Jonathan Allen, he's become a star, not at the level of Chris Jones, but he's a star. And then the next 2 on the list for pure pass rush grade, per play basis, Kalijah Kancey and Jalen Carter. Okay, so I think that's a big part of their projection. They both, when I talk about the model and all that stuff, it's taking a number like this, seeing how well it projects at the next level, and then weighing it appropriately. All the data says, hey, Kalijah Kancey looks like a good player. The only issue is maybe at 280 pounds, not like a 6'5", 280, 5-tech body, but the undersized D-tackle type of player. Will that translate?
There's that. There's also, when you listed the sort of hits and the misses, like the misses for this are 2 undersized interior defensive linemen. The hit is the dude that weighed like 315 and is, can play everywhere. When I alter the model for D tackle, I just look at like 300 pounders, the hit rate is through the roof. It's really safe. So if you're at 90th percentile and you're 300 pounds, I'm like, boom, I feel really good. That's Jalen Carter, right? Right. That's going to hit. The Kancey one brings a little bit of doubt to the board. But it is worth pointing out, like his His grading is excellent. His pass rushing production is excellent. He got better every year of his career. He was good right off the bat with a pass rushing grade of 79, 80. Then he went up to 84. Year 2, went up to 92.4. That's that real elite, like, dominant force this most recent season. He had 47 pressures, which is, that's fine. It's not a great number. But he did it in 275 pass rushes, which is a production rate, like, through the roof. So... like the stuff you talk about, and he was never bad against the run, like good every single year.
He's that disruptive run defender. You still worry about big guards at the NFL level.
He's going to play in the backfield, and sometimes that doesn't work if they're able to get 2 guys on you and drive you away from the point of attack. But like he will defend the run in the backfield, causing problems. He will make individual blocks more difficult by his get-off, like the stuff that you talk about with Aaron Donald, where you can't run certain concepts without adjusting them, because there are guys that can't make that block against Aaron Donald. Kancey will be the same thing. Again, not to the extent that Aaron Donald is, because nobody is, but that's the kind of force that he can bring.
All right, we're an hour in plus, hour and 6 minutes, and we're 10 picks in, perfectly on pace here. But we didn't go nuts on the quarterbacks. We're giving some love to other positions and theories and all that fun stuff. So might need to go a little bit quicker here, but we'll see how it goes. Let's do the next 2 picks together here. The Tennessee Titans at 11 and the Houston Texans back up on the clock at 12. If I'm the Titans at 11, I think tackle was in play earlier this offseason, could still be in play if I was the GM there, but Titans are only going to go as far as they improve their receiving core. So I'm going my top receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, as the pick at number 11 for the Tennessee Titans. I want him as my route runner, opposite Treylon Burks, and just kind of getting that receiving core back on track here. I think that's a pretty solid 1-2 punch. I don't know if either is the alpha one, but I think 2 really good receivers, kind of like having let's say Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, that type of potential where neither one's the pure one, but they have different styles and they're going to challenge defenses. So give me Smith-Njigba to Tennessee.
This, I think, would be a potential landing spot for Will Levis. Like if he makes it to 11, and you're Tennessee, you're sitting there again with the finger poised over the reset button for the last month or so. I mean, Levis is a fairly natural successor, I think, to Ryan Tannehill in terms of some skill set things, some of the things he can do well. I think they'd be pretty tempted by that. It's also, again, the kind of range where, does Tampa Bay love him? Does Minnesota love him? Like, do these teams that are picking in the late teens or the 20s, are they now interested in making that jump for a Will Levis? If they are stuck at this pick, if they're not drafting a quarterback, I think this is probably a good spot I feel good about wide receiver value at this point.
So I think I may have predetermined Levis's fall to a certain point just to kind of make that point that I would take him lower in the teens or whatever. You're absolutely right, though. Tennessee, there's rumors right now that they're trying to trade up. That was one of the Monday morning rumor that Tennessee's trying to trade up to 3 with the Arizona Cardinals, that they have a quarterback in mind. A lot of times when we talked about the trade-ups, it was the Raiders, the Falcons, teams in the top 10. But the Titans at 11, and then there's really not, maybe Washington at 16. Like if we're talking teams that could make a move that aren't completely 100% certain at quarterback, even though Washington claims they are. Those are the types of teams that could go make a move. Detroit is always potentially in the mix if they want to just think to the future and have Jared Goff as a pure bridge. And then Tampa Bay. The Lions are at 18, and then Tampa Bay's at 19. It would be interesting for the Lions to pick at 6, and then if a quarterback drops, move there from 18 up to go get a quarterback as well.
Because this group of wide receivers at the top, I mean, we were talking about it in our wide receiver rankings show, it's effectively a big 3 for us, right? It's Jackson Smith-Njigba, it's Quentin Johnston, and certainly for me, it's Jordan Addison. Those are all very different wide receivers. Does that factor in at all for Tennessee, who have Treylon Burks, who I don't think they or we really know what he is yet, not in terms of how good he'll be, but in terms of like where he plays, where he wins, what should he be position-wise within that offense? Does that affect which wide receiver you would be more interested in drafting?
So I think for me in my rankings, I haven't thought about this for every team. I think I would want Smith-Njigba for every team first. And then I would start debating Jordan Addison versus Quentin Johnston. So I think Smith-Njigba's skill set plays no matter what. I think Quentin Johnston versus Jordan Addison, I might get into styles and types a little bit more, debating those guys. Or Zay Flowers. Like, look, we ranked Zay low, but I told you there's a team. If Zay Flowers is available, I like him, right? He's probably a better fit than some others. So I would get into types, I think, when I get to Quentin Johnston, which brings me to pick 12 with the Houston Texans. I'm going Quentin Johnston for the Texans. So to complement C.J. Stroud, now that would have been cool if it was C.J. Stroud and Smith and Jigba, right?
Yeah.
The recent trends of college quarterbacks and receivers being reunited at the NFL level. But I'll go Quentin Johnston for Houston and give them a downfield threat. I don't know if it's I've been watching a lot of corners more lately, and I'm seeing Quentin Johnston win a little bit more against corners that are, draftable and all that stuff. I might be coming around on him a little bit more than I was previously. I get it, right? We described it on the receiver rankings show. I don't love him as much as others, but add him to the mix with Robert Woods and Nico Collins and John Mechie. I think it's a size speed threat that they don't have.
What's the strike rate of Big 12 corners? It can't be good.
Xavier Howard
has
been good.
That's true. Baylor.
Out of Baylor like 6 years ago, though. I mean, that was a while now. Jeff Gladney, legit, rest in peace. But Gladney was one of those guys we said he's battle-tested, coming out of TCU,
that didn't go
which
well.
he was. He had a lot of challenging roles. He was just okay for Minnesota. I feel like, I don't know. I haven't looked.
It doesn't feel like it's been a great strike rate.
It's not great.
No.
Anyway, Quentin Johnston, add him as a deep threat to Houston at pick 12.
Okay.
That puts the Jets on the clock at 13. We still have, let me get this, the big board, the remaining players. We still have Will Levis, Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, Joey Porter Jr., Dalton Kincaid. For the Jets, I might be pushing need here a little bit. Where did I go? What did I do? It is what I thought. Yeah. I'm going Paris Johnson, the tackle from Ohio State. So Paris Johnson Jr., he's 7th on the remaining consensus board. I don't love the tackles at the top, but I think he's pretty safe. I don't want to say that. I don't like saying safe about tackles. I think he's solid. I think he's fine. So Paris Johnson comes in, left tackle insurance from Mekhi Becton, perhaps right tackle starter, and we're shoring up the offensive line for our guy Aaron Rodgers here with the Jets.
Oh, I see. Paris Johnson Jr. is a guy who the grading has not been tremendously kind to him, for his college career.
Yeah.
So you got 3 years,
Played guard until last year.
Right. So we've gone right guard, left tackle. The overall grade has been kind both years. 3 years if you count 26 snaps the season before. But the grade has been good. But it's been consistently strong as a run blocker, and then last year at left tackle was the first good year as a pass blocker, and even that was good, not great. It's like, gave up a couple of sacks, gave up some pressure, overall reasonable and very good for a run of games, late in the season. But it's reasonably thin on the ground in terms of here's some great elite play we're comfortable with.
Yeah. So again, this point of the draft, I don't want to draft anybody. If you're the Jets, I think there's a pretty strong need at tackle. I think this tackle class, just looking at the data here, the data loves Skoronski, but it's in part because it's not overweighing the 32 and a quarter inch arms of Skoronski. 32 and a quarter. There's no real precedent for that arm length wise at tackle. But the raw data loves him. Beyond that, the next few, Braden Smith, but he's not even that low, is he?
I think he is. I think he's the same.
So I guess he could do it. So beyond that, Paris Johnson from Ohio State, Broderick Jones from Georgia, Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. Data says they're good. They're fine. They're not in this unstoppable hit rate or anything like that. I'm going to be lower on Darnell Wright from Tennessee. He's another one of those I love the tape, but the data says no. My heart's saying yes, but the data's saying no type of thing. So I don't love this tackle class overall. There's not a lot of pure hits that I feel there's not a lot of players that I have a strong confidence level in at a position where the data has been really good as far as hit rates go the last couple of years. So I'm reaching a little bit, basically, for Paris Johnson.
Anton Harrison probably has the best grading profile of that group.
Yeah.
But I would say Broderick Jones also has a better grading profile than Paris Johnson does, certainly from a pass protection standpoint. Anton Harrison has got 2 years of very strong pass blocking grades. Now, again, they could be stronger. You know, they're not like 90 plus, shut down, never giving up a pressure type of thing. We're dealing with like 85, 83 type season grades, which are very good. But if you're talking about this is the first tackle or second tackle off the board, I guess, with Skoronski, first left tackle off the board, so we say, you'd love to be a little bit more confident than that.
Yeah, and the other thing is last year's draft class had like a couple tackles later on that I'd be like, all right, sure, I'll take them later. There might be one or two that I feel good about later in the draft. By the way, fun stat here: Paris Johnson, his arm length was 36 in an eighth. Almost 4 inches longer than Peter Skoronski, plus or minus whatever error bars there are in this ridiculous measurement process. But Paris Johnson, who did play guard for a while, ridiculous wingspan, ridiculous arm length, hashtag looks the part at left tackle or right tackle because it's the same position. So I'm taking Paris Johnson for the Jets at 13. That brings me to the Patriots at 14, and I've made this pairing before. I'm going Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State. Taking the corner from Penn State, Joey Porter Jr. I love the fit to New England. Adds a different body type there. They haven't had the big, long press corner there since Stephon Gilmore left that they could really trust one-on-one. I think Joey Porter might have the best mix there. He's better in man than zone, but it's one of those things I think you could teach that a little bit, right? You can kind of coach him up in New England. So I like Joey Porter Jr. for the Patriots here.
Yeah, I think that's one of those fits that's made sense like from day one and continues to make sense. So I'm on board with that.
So there we go. We've talked about that one a little bit before. I have to give a good soundbite, though, for my ghostwriter of the mock draft. Joey Porter Jr., great fit for the Patriots in round one because of his press man coverage skills. How's that?
Perfect.
Good soundbite?
Yeah.
What did I do here with Green Bay?
You screwed up. That's what you did.
What did I screw up?
You drafted the wrong player.
Oh, who should I have taken?
You should have taken Dalton Kincaid.
For New England?
No, for Green Bay.
Oh, yeah, I didn't. I wanted to mix it up a little bit. I considered Dalton Kincaid. Mm-hmm. Oh, you've seen it?
Yes.
You've seen my mock? Because I did run through it last night. Yeah, so the Green Bay Packers absolutely could go Dalton Kincaid here. I think he's the best tight end. He's a vertical threat. He's an excellent route runner. We're not going to be able to see him test or whatever, so whatever. He moves really well on the field. Adding Kincaid as the tight end with Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, I mean, great. But I didn't do that. Sorry.
What did you do?
I'm taking Nolan Smith, the edge defender from Georgia, over Tyree Wilson. I'm taking Nolan Smith for the Packers here. We're going to add him
that part
opposite
I don't.
Rashawn Gary with Preston Smith and just having a lot more flexibility now with my pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, Nolan Smith over Tyree Wilson, I have no problem with. Nolan Smith over Dalton Kincaid for this team, I don't like at all.
I know, I understand. So I mixed it up because I think we gave them Kincaid a couple weeks ago. Trying to make a point here, I would take Nolan Smith, I think, in the top 15 here. He's coming off the injury, only played a couple hundred snaps the last couple of years. Slightly undersized for an edge. He's in the 230s, but he ran a sub 4.4. That's not the thing that's putting him over the top, though. For me, it's the pop in his hands. It's his ability to rush the passer, play the run. I think he'll be a beautiful complement for Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith there. I think we could find a way to make them all work.
It is interesting. He is like 10, 11 spots lower on the consensus board than Tyree Wilson. But I think I'm with you that I have more confidence in Nolan Smith being a good NFL player than I do in Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, I think we're going to rank. So we did ask the people, what do they want us to rank? They said corners first and then edge defenders. We're not going to rank every position. We're not going to do a show on every position leading up to the draft. There was a recent request for running backs. I wouldn't hate a running back show for the fantasy people.
I mean, I've thrown out multiple polls now.
Yeah.
And every single time, the people do not want the running back show.
They don't.
It's dead ass last in the poll every time.
It could be fun. Maybe it could be fun late in the process. But I think Nolan Smith that's edge 2, right? That's only the second edge off the board.
Yeah.
I would call him edge 2 in this draft class. So that's the point I wanted to make there. Unofficially.
Until later.
I have some more. I have more data points to add to the mix here. We're still waiting on the scouts, the scouting takes, as the model does take into account some scouting takes. That puts Washington up on the board. Now we'll go Utah tight end Dalton Kincaid to Washington. So now we've got more threats. If we're going to build around Sam Howell, if that's what we're going to do, we're going to give him all the pass game options we can. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas is still there as my big tight end, and Dalton Kincaid is my move tight end. I
bet build around Sam Howell was not a phrase you thought you'd be saying for a while.
I said if that's what we're doing.
Once he slipped to the 5th round of the draft.
I didn't think we would.
Yeah.
No. Again, last year at this time, if I remember correctly, I think Howell was the guy I said, remember we did this, Detroit's going to trade back into the 1st, right? We did a lot of that. Detroit's going to trade back into 32 to pick a quarterback. I think I gave them Sam Howell, either my mock or one of the ones that we did.
I don't think I ever had him doing that.
I think I had Howell as that late first
I had
guy.
them doing that from Malik Willis a couple of times.
Yeah.
Because they had that second pick, right? They were sitting there at 30 or 30, whatever it was. 32, right? Because the Rams.
Yeah.
So they had the 32nd pick of the draft. I know multiple times I thought, well, if the 32nd pick of the draft for Detroit, having already drafted number 2, that feels like your classic house money, free bet, just throw a gamble. And to me, that was Malik Willis.
Yeah, so where are we right now? Dalton Kincaid with all those playmakers in Washington. I think Kincaid's the best. He's the best receiving tight end in this draft. Feel best about him. I know a lot of people love this tight end class. I think he's the class of the tight end class.
I just pulled up the grinding the mocks chart for Sam Howell as well, and it never dropped below the top of the 3rd round. It dropped, and it went from essentially number 1 overall, if you go back far enough, to the bottom of the 1st round, and then midway through the 2nd round, but it never got anywhere near where there literally isn't a single data point within a round of where he was drafted.
Yeah, he was so good as a true freshman. He was good as a sophomore. He didn't throw the ball as well as a junior.
That scattershot plot of mocks all over the place, there was, for the entire process, there was not a single mock draft of any description that was within a round of where he ended up getting drafted.
All right, let's go to pick 17. Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock. The big debate in Pittsburgh, do they go tackle? Is there a corner? They did just bring in Patrick Peterson this offseason. You have Patrick Peterson with Ahkello Witherspoon over there. The corners, I think there's a bit of a drop-off here. I'd rather take some corners lower. I'm going to be lower on Deonte Banks from Maryland. He's currently 4th on the remaining big board here.
You've just been sending me video after video of him struggling, shall we say.
Was it Banks? Oh, yeah.
Banks is the guy that got toasted in a double move and just rugby tackled a dude.
Yes.
Yeah. Which, to be honest, is better than not rugby tackling him and giving up a touchdown on the double move. But still, not great.
That's one of those the announcers say, smart play here. I'm like,
right.
Well, the smarter play is to, not bite the first time, but it's okay. Banks is an amazing mover. He's unbelievable makeup speed. I have a comp for him that I think you'll appreciate after you really dive into the tape for Banks. We'll save that for Thursday. I have a Deonte Banks comp, but that comp and my film analysis and the data analysis on Banks makes me think I'd rather him in the 2nd, where corners, only hit a quarter of the time,
where they're always
of course. So for the Steelers, I'm going somewhat Broderick Jones. I'm going to go the tackle from Georgia, Broderick Jones. I'm going to bring him in, let him compete left or right tackle, but I need to upgrade either of those spots, right? I think we talked on one of our recent shows. Rank the Steelers offensive linemen, both tackles, Dan Moore and Chooks, Okorafor, both were 4 and 5 on the list as far. The guards and centers are improved, but I think Broderick Jones, still a young player for Georgia, hasn't played a ton of football. Last year was his first full year as a starter. I think Broderick Jones has a chance to be the next left tackle there.
Yep.
I don't love the tackle class, like I said. I don't feel great about these picks, but I'm forcing myself to make picks, so here we are.
Absolutely. By the way, add the Sam Howell thing to the list of why making declarative statements about the draft before it happens is idiotic. We had a year more of the process, quote unquote, with Sam Howell, and not one single mock draft was within a round of where he ended up getting drafted. So when you're throwing out there
They
on
weren't
Twitter,
within 2 rounds, 3 rounds.
well,
really.
I mean, most of them, but literally there wasn't a single one within an entire round of where he was drafted. So when you're out there saying this is terrible, this will never happen, we just don't know. Nobody
Sam Howell
knows.
will never fall to the 5th round.
Nobody knows.
It'll never happen.
Stuff that you think has no chance of happening ends up happening every single year.
All right, the Lions are on the clock now at 18. Should they consider Will Levis? Yes. All my theories say yes. I'm not going to go that route, though. So would they consider Tyree Wilson? Tyree Wilson's still number 2 here on the big board. I would. I mean, I'd consider Tyree Wilson at this spot. If the draft fell like this, as I've said before, though, again, nothing against Tyree Wilson. I could talk myself into him. I'm assuming some other team's going to take him, and I'm not going to, but I can't in this scenario. Lucas Van Ness is on the board as well as the 3rd player on the consensus board, and that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go Van Ness from Iowa instead of Tyree Wilson, but I'm going to add another edge in name to the Lions' defensive front that's now getting even more loaded after we saw Aiden Hutchinson last year, James Houston break out. They got some other players there. Van Ness, though, might be the best combination of inside-outside threat. And so now I've got a bit of a power rusher who can create some flexibility.
Yeah, so they already drafted Weatherspoon with pick number 6.
Yeah, so I added a corner.
Corner's already taken care of. They're not in that market at this spot. Your decisions are going to be, is Will Levis value here? Bearing in mind we passed on him at 6, which probably plays into that. Defensive line, Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, Miles Murphy. There's options there. There's receiver options. Is Jordan Addison value at this point, even though their wide receiver room is good? They have, obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think those two can coexist in the same offense. I don't think there's redundancy there. They have Jamison Williams that we expect to be a big player for them. Like, they've got players. Is this, though, a spot where you think adding a player of lower value but a superstar at that position would make some sense? So are Michael Mayer from tight end from Notre Dame or Bijan Robinson options at 18?
I would say Bijan, no. Not just because my natural bias against running backs, not Bijan. Just because David Montgomery has come in to replace Jamal Williams as the future Detroit Lions all-time touchdown leader. And DeAndre Swift. Single season, of course. DeAndre Swift as your pass-catching back. So not so much Bijan. Michael Mayer, yes. I mean, I'm high enough on Mayer to take him, I think, anywhere in the 20s. So we're sitting here at 18. It's close. Might be a touch high for him. I do feel like the Lions have done a good job making the Brock Wrights of the world into impact tight ends. Dan Campbell, tight end creator over there in Detroit. But yeah, I do think that's an intriguing option. Just, more playmakers. I think Mayer has a chance to be a Pat Freiermuth, just solid player who Freiermuth fell to the 2nd. I think Mayer will go a little bit higher, but will be a good player. So
imagine how much fun Dan Campbell would have personally molding Michael Mayer into a plus all-round tight end.
He would love it.
Yeah.
It'd be great for morale everywhere. All right.
When Mike Vrabel gets in the trenches and starts teaching up the D linemen by actually blocking them.
I told you the story before too. Mike Vrabel, not just in the trenches, in the fights that they had in training camp with the Bucs, breaking people up, helmets flying everywhere, and Vrabel's like, whatever, I'm going in. I'm going in. It's
nothing I haven't seen.
I haven't had a good street fight in a while. Get me in there. All right. Speaking of the Bucs, they're on the clock at pick 19. I think I saved Will Levis for them.
There's Will Levis.
I would take Will Levis here. I think for all the other needs that the Bucs have, taking a shot at quarterback here, I don't know if they'll be bad enough this year to pick in the top 10 to get involved in the Caleb Williams and Drake May sweepstakes next year, or whoever else emerges. So Baker Mayfield was signed specifically as a bridge quarterback, right? Some of the other teams that I passed at quarterback, I don't think Garoppolo's a bridge. I think the Raiders think they're going to win with him for a little bit. So the Bucs are the first team to come up who truly just signed a one-year bridge quarterback, Baker Mayfield, in declaring, we still need somebody. So I'll go Will Levis here. And again, part of it's to make the point, I think he's going to go lower maybe than we anticipated.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, this makes sense. Like, at this point, it's value. Again, there are going to be other teams, I think, if he slips this far, that are going to be interested, like Minnesota, whoever. Like, there are teams, I think, that are going to be fascinated by Will Levis if he starts to slip to the bottom of the top 20. But if he does make it all the way to Tampa Bay, I mean, right now it's Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask in a two-man battle for the position. Why not add Will Levis? Like, if they all stink, nothing changed. We're fine. If, however, two of them stink and Will Levis ends up being good, we might actually have a future.
All right, so I'm taking Levis. Let's take a shot here with the Bucs at 19. We've talked a lot about the quarterbacks. Go check our QB ranking show for more Will Levis analysis. Sam's a little higher on him than I am. Renner's higher on him than I am. I could absolutely be wrong, but that's why you take that shot here in the first round. On the first time, so the Seahawks are on the clock at 20. I would probably redo this pick if I could, but I'll tell you what I did initially. We'll stick with it. This is where Tyree Wilson comes off the board for me.
You can't even bring yourself to draft him at 20 in retrospect.
No, it's more that your suggestion for the Seahawks has been Jordan Addison a lot of the time. And in hindsight, I like that. Okay. I like Jordan Addison. It's not a Tyree. I need Tyree Wilson to fall and all this stuff. I'm going to say I use the phrase risk appetite quite a bit.
Okay.
My risk appetite is higher. I'm more likely to take risks maybe when I have 2 first-round picks, right? Or when I have more swings, right? So I'm going to take Tyree Wilson, and it's a home run shot, right? I'm taking a shot here. I'm pairing him with Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
We have a massive need on the defensive line in Seattle. And I know there's a couple like Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu, who's kind of a hybrid edge coverage type player. That's not going to keep me from drafting an edge. It's still a need in Seattle. I don't think Darrell Taylor's very good. So Tyree Wilson comes in, and we'll see, right? Like I said, I can convince myself on tape using his last year that he could be a good pass rusher. The total body of work, though, does not project to a productive NFL player.
Yeah, like, we've talked before about how if you can push your grades into the 90s as an edge rusher, you've got a pretty decent chance of being a good NFL player. His grade never topped 75 overall. It never topped 80 as a pass rusher. His most recent season, the one that you would hang your hat on as, oh, this is who he can be, was an 80 grade with 50 pressures. It's fine. It's not. It's a long way away from being dominant.
Yeah, I'll probably let me just say this really quickly. I'll probably repeat it on the Edge show, and in my head, we'll do a show where we kind of lay out all the reasons, positive or negative from a data standpoint on some of these players. I did a little experiment with Wilson. Right now in my model, 17th percentile historically.
Yikes.
It's really low. It's at a point where 0 players have hit. Right. So. That's because he doesn't have workout numbers in there, so I did an experiment. If I gave him Trayvon Walker's workout, okay?
So if you made him the most athletic edge rusher of all time,
yeah,
what does that do to his percentage of
Let me just do it again, because I think he went up to 40th percentile,
God.
Which is where Walker was, right? Because Walker's workout was fantastic, right? It meant something.
Yes.
But last year I was laying out the case against Walker, being depending on your perspective, we've never seen anyone work out like this, but we've also never seen anyone hit with Trayvon Walker's production, right? Could he do it? Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, he goes up. So I gave him Trayvon Walker's workout with Tyree Wilson's arm length, which is spectacular, 35-plus inches, 84-inch wingspan. He goes up to 36th percentile player. So that's my argument against Tyree Wilson. That's why I'm not trying to be harsh with don't draft list. I'm just saying, depending on your perspective here, my perspective is there is nobody from a data perspective. Let me just see, 36th percentile. I think there's one solid player that's come out over the last few years. So the data is not kind. If you come through the perspective of planet theory, there's nobody with this type of length, there's nobody with this type of movement and this and that. And I don't think Tyree Wilson's not Trayvon Walker level.
No.
Athlete.
Not even close, I don't think.
So I was just doing that as an experiment. So nobody has become elite historically at that percentile, and there has been two high-end players, 4%, it's like let's say this, 8% hit rate to become a solid player in that band under 40th percentile versus 38% hit rate. So it goes from 38% hit rate if you take the top end of players in these ranges. It goes down to 8% if you take them in the bottom range. That's why I'm just saying I just wouldn't do it.
And that's all giving him credit for being the most athletic edge rusher to ever enter the draft, which he isn't.
Correct.
So, yeah, that's not great. The other thing is, for a guy that's like 270-plus pounds and that size and that length, he's not a particularly good run defender. Like, he would be 4th, 5th in terms of run defense just amongst this edge rushing group. So, even if you're like, okay, he's not maybe the most disruptive, like he's not the elite pass rusher, but he's going to bring this edge, like this sets a hard edge, be a dominant run defender. Nope. Like, he's not bringing that either.
No, he gets moved like he's 230 sometimes. Like Nolan Smith at 230 is a better run defender than Tyree Wilson at 270. Question about what the sample size is. I got to see my 80th percentile players I've had historically. I've got 18, 31, say almost 40 guys. Players under 40th percentile, we're looking at about 55 guys.
Yeah,
and so those are the percentages.
And another reminder, like a big part of what you got in this stuff is PFF grading, which is not just an algorithm or stats; it is tape-derived data.
Yeah, so that's why I think that's why it's useful, especially on offensive and defensive line, right? So it's a lot of data.
It is tape. It's not just it's quantifying the tape. It's not just sort of pulling out a bunch of like. You folded measurable data into this, right? But in addition to measurable data is tape-derived information that quantifies how good his tape actually is.
Right.
As opposed to just watching the tape and arbitrarily deciding, yeah, I like that. That was great. Like, it's quantifying that tape and folding it into a data model.
I do my own tape study just to get, like, my own take on a player. That's why I said, like, Darnell Wright from Tennessee, I like him. My eyes like him. The data doesn't. The data, which is also derived from film, right? So those things will exist. With Tyree Wilson, I'm kind of like back and forth from just like my eyes standpoint, and I'm out from a data standpoint. But for this exercise, if this is what I'm left with, it's my second pick if I'm Seattle. More willing to maybe take that shot. I get it. I get why people like him. I also honestly think that the NFL is going to be lower on Tyree Wilson maybe than the consensus board has been so far.
I could see that.
All right, that brings us to the Chargers at 21. I went Jordan Addison here for the Chargers. So, they need, I keep saying all offseason, they need speed. They were one of the slowest teams last year if you look at the numbers. Addison's he's not a 4-3 burner or anything, but the game speed is good.
Yes.
Right?
Critically.
And now he's a different type of player than what they have with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams.
Yep.
And we're just trying to maximize Justin Herbert here. So give me Addison to the Chargers.
Yes, very critically, Addison is a player whose tracked game speed is higher than his timed speed, which was not great, and vaguely surprisingly so. Also, like, when you look, this is 21 is one of those mock draft sweet spots where almost everybody has been giving them Zay Flowers every single draft, right? It's one of them. It must be one of the most common player draft position and team combinations I've seen. I cannot get beyond I think the consensus board actually has Zay Flowers above Jordan Addison now, which to me is just madness. Cannot understand that. I cannot get it. I don't get it. I really don't. I can see a world where I'm off on Zay Flowers to an extent. I really can't see one where, it's all the bell curve and percentage chances the guy hit the high end, the mid end, the low end of his potential outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. Like the Venn diagram of Addison being amazing, Zay Flowers being amazing, which one, or not the Venn, like the two bell curves. I would be extremely surprised by an outcome that has Zay Flowers, on average, turning out a better NFL player than Jordan Addison. I just really can't get behind that one.
We got to go back and think about those takes. There's one take that I remember from years ago, not to go on it, but the Eagles chose Fletcher Cox over Dontari Poe. I think it was pick 12 versus 13, something like that. I remember at the time thinking, that's an interesting, you took this guy over that guy. Dontari Poe was Planet Theory. He was the first guy that ran sub-5 at 340 pounds.
Yeah.
And they took Fletcher Cox. And it was just one of those pivot point type moves that just stood out. We should try to remember all of those things, right? Jordan Addison versus Zay Flowers, their career path and all that stuff. By the way, Fletcher Cox turned out much better than Dontari Poe. It was just one of those. Every year I think about, would you take this player or that player? What's the where's the debate? What's it going to end up looking like? We should think back to Addison and Flowers for sure.
Yeah. I'd be amazed if Addison does not turn out a better player than Zay Flowers at the next level. This is another potential Bijan Robinson draft spot with Austin Eckler agitating for a move with pretty much nothing behind him.
We did that a couple drafts ago, I believe. But I like Addison. Give me a wide receiver 3, move Josh Palmer down to wide receiver 4, and then we're okay, right? I mean, I like that as a receiving core there for the Chargers. Brings the Ravens up at pick 22. To be honest, I actually didn't think about quarterback much here. I don't know if the Ravens might be in the market to trade up now from 22. Are they going to try to make a move at quarterback? We don't know what they're going to do now with Lamar legitimately asking out.
Yeah.
I feel like I always pick edge defenders for the Ravens. I don't love the options here. Just to repeat myself, I don't love the options here. But I'm going Myles Murphy, the edge defender from Clemson, a power edge. They already have a whole bunch of different types of pass rushers there in Baltimore, but in a spot that I don't love, the next group of players here, maybe Zay Flowers is a good fit here. A speed receiver that I said Zay would be great in Kansas City. Maybe he'd be good in Baltimore, play action guy. But I don't know what type of offense they're really going to be running here.
Well, this is the spot. So this is like the pivot point of the wide receiver group. Certainly if you have a board that looks like ours, where to me it's the top 3 wide receivers. It's Addison, Smith and Jigba, and Quentin Johnson from TCU. If those 3 guys are gone, I think there's a gap between those 3 and the likes of Zay Flowers, which is why I don't understand putting those 2 guys together, let alone ahead of Addison. But if those 3 guys are gone and your board looks like mine, you hate this spot if you need a wide receiver, because you're like, I don't think Zay Flowers is worth, pick number 22 in this draft. To me, he was the 3rd of the smaller wide receivers, like the Josh Downs, the Tank Dells, but I don't love those guys at 22 either. To me, there's a gap.
I would say, now I would take right here at pick 22 and beyond, I think everyone else I feel much better about taking in the second round.
Yeah.
From here on.
Same.
And this isn't like, is it a first round grade? Is it a second round? I'm just saying all of these players going forward, if I had the pick, I would do everything I could to move down to 32.
Every player.
Every player.
Okay.
Every player from here on out, I would rather take in the second round here at pick 22.
I certainly feel that way about the wide receivers.
No, I'm talking everybody.
Yeah, everybody
Maybe it started
available.
at pick 20.
Including Bijan.
Including Bijan.
Wow.
Yeah, I would rather take everyone else here in the second round. And that's not, this isn't an uncommon thing. We've said before, in draft rooms, teams have 15 first-round grades or whatever it is. Doesn't mean they're not going to pick at pick 25. It just means they have 15 first-round grades on players. And chances are they're going to get one of their 15 to drop because it's a different 15 from everyone else. I have made every pick so far, so my board's getting stretched thin here because it's all my picks. None of my players have fallen because I picked them all already. So it's the challenge in mock drafting. So I will second round for all these guys going forward here.
Okay.
Including the Vikings at pick 20. I don't have a great explanation for Myles Murphy to the Ravens. I think he's up there with Tyree Wilson as a prospect. He's a power edge. I think adding that power to Odafe Owe, Tyus Bowser, and David Ajabu, that's actually a completely different type. They've had Justin Houston there the last couple of years. They've made all that work. I think there's enough pass rush snaps to go around. Myles Murphy's a very good edge defender. I think he probably steals some early down snaps, maybe from Owe, makes Owe more of a designated pass rush type. So there is a way to fit him into that Ravens defense.
Okay.
There you go. Vikings at 23. You talked about the receivers. Number 4. Did I have Tank Dell? I might need to redo the Tank Dell thing with his size. I think I had Josh Downs as my 4, didn't I? I'm going Josh Downs.
Can't remember what yours was.
I think he was my 4th receiver. That's why I went with him here. I'm going Josh Downs to the Vikings at pick 23. So now you're going to start seeing some picks from me where you're seeing them mostly go in the second. A lot of these guys are going in the second round, and I'm going to put them in the first. I'm going to have some different picks here.
I hope you went against your own draft board. That would be great.
No, Josh Downs. Data likes him.
I like
him on film. Those mesh. My eyes and the data say yes. to Josh Downs. And there's your Justin Jefferson compliment. There's your Adam Thielen replacement. He's an outside receiver. I've seen the Tyler Lockett type of comps. I think he's not that exact player, but he's that type. So I like Downs here.
Yeah, short, speedy receiver who was one of the best contested catch receivers in the nation. Like, he's been exceptionally good at that kind of stuff. So he doesn't play as much as a small receiver as some of the other guys. I liked him better than Zay Flowers. Now I like Tank Dell better than him, but don't hate this pick.
So there you go. Downs goes 23 to the Vikings. That puts the Jags up at pick 24. I hated this spot for the Jags as well. I think they have a tackle need after losing Jawan Taylor. Walker Little's scheduled to step in at right tackle opposite Cam Robinson. I think I need more insurance there on the offensive line. So this is where I go Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. He's at 23 on the consensus board, so it's right around where the consensus has him. I said, again, I don't love the tackle class, but I think a lot of these guys are solid. They're I would probably draft him in the 20s type of range. So Harrison there, he's been a better pass protector than run blocker, but I'm going to bring him in and let him compete at right tackle with Walker Little.
Yeah, I think offensive line they're basically looking at the trenches, I think, both sides at this kind of draft spot, which is, to be honest, where most of the value is. So Harrison makes sense. Interior, is Osiris Torrance an option this high in the draft? He seems to be slipping the longer into this process we get, just generally.
Yeah, he's interesting. When you look at, I'll have Osiris Torrance going later in the first round here. When you look, we'll talk about him when we get there, but his numbers were not great from a workout standpoint, but it's still, I think, good enough to draft. There's a lot of just big guards historically, like Torrance, that have had success. I'm not too worried about him from a workout standpoint, but I think that's a big reason why he may have fallen to this point. So the Giants are up now at 25. I haven't done a reset this entire show, but look, we got like 13 minutes left here, so follow along on YouTube. Here's what the consensus board has now. The Giants are at 25. The consensus board says Deonte Banks, corner from Maryland, is still available. Brian Bresee, the defensive tackle from Clemson. Zay Flowers, receiver, BC. Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas. Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. That's the top 5 on the consensus board right now. For the Giants, they're interesting because they already have just a bunch of small, speedy receiver types, right? And that's what's left.
Yeah.
So I feel like they might be in the second round Michael Wilson sweepstakes or Bryce Ford Wheaton. You're a guy that picked later in the draft just to get some bigger bodies there. Because their current receiving core is Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jamison Crowder. So like adding a Zay Flowers to that, are you just trying to forget building a basketball team? You're building the ice hockey team of all the skinny guys, right? Ice hockey, the 4-on-4 game in Nintendo. You're picking all the skinnies. You had Nintendo in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Giants are building their receiving core like you would in ice hockey, where you could pick the medium guy, the fat guy, or the skinny guys. They're picking all the skinny guys. Okay. I don't want another skinny guy.
No. Yeah, I mean,
shout in the chat if you at least get my reference. Sam's looking at me like I'm an idiot. I just played this game recently with my buddy, by the way. He has this little throwback, and we were just playing ice hockey. Yeah. Crushed him. USA. Killed him.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't.
So I'm not going to go receiving.
I mean, I don't understand quite how Zay Flowers would fit into this offense and not have some form of redundancy. So yeah, they would love a bigger bodied receiver to be available here, but there really aren't any.
So I'm scrolling down the draft board. Tyler, you're going to have to scroll down a little bit. I don't even know where he is left here on the.
You have to scroll quite a bit.
You can sort by interior offensive line.
Keep scrolling.
Oh, number 68 on the consensus board. This is where I'm going.
When you have to click to page 2, you know you might be reaching.
John Michael Schmitz, center, Minnesota. I'm taking him for the Giants. I think John Michael Schmitz is a prospect at a similar level. He's probably a tick below Tyler Linderbaum from last year. He's a tick below Creed Humphrey, who did go in the second round when it picked 60 or whatever it was. So maybe John Michael Schmitz's value is correct by the consensus board.
45th on the consensus board, which puts him, by the way, one spot ahead of Josh Downs.
Oh, is he? I see him at 68th on this public board right now that we're using, the one we're using in the mock draft sim. You have him a little bit higher?
I mean, I'm using, I typed in consensus board into Google, and that's what I'm using.
Okay, so he's a little bit higher in the other consensus board that's being used. We've got a couple different ones here. So John Michael Schmitz, reasoning here is I think he's the best interior offensive line prospect, a tick above Osiris Torrance. He's playing a different position. He's playing center. It's a huge need for the Giants. I think you're getting your hashtag 10-year starter at center. The only knock on John Michael Schmitz compared to Creed Humphrey and compared to Tyler Linderbaum is the workout stuff. It is
athleticism.
It is terrible. You know who else was terrible from a workout standpoint?
From a center standpoint?
Travis Frederick was also terrible.
Really?
Right? And then you get out there and you watch, remember he ran like a 5.5 or something like that, and you watch Travis Frederick execute a reach block. He was the outside zone standard at center for years for the Cowboys, and he was so fast off the ball. You watch John Michael Schmitz, who was the highest graded offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl, and you watch him execute an outside zone block and get into space. His athleticism's just fine for playing football. So he is a 99th percentile production center, or interior offensive lineman in my model. The combine number isn't there, but he's still a 90th percentile player for me, and one of the highest graded centers.
Yeah, Frederick's numbers stank.
They absolutely stank.
Third percentile for 40 and the 20-yard split.
Look up Travis Frederick while you're there.
That's what I'm. Sorry, that's where I'm. Frederick is.
Frederick. Yeah, they stank.
8th percentile 10-yard split.
Yep.
18th percentile broad jump. The things that he was best at were the vertical, which is only a 54th percentile, and the 3-cone, which you think, oh, that's more important, but that was only the 38th. Like terrible. 38th percentile for the thing he was best at from a movement standpoint.
You've cited RAS, the relative athletic score.
Yes.
And I think it's people need to know how to use these things, right? And that's why I have a draft model, right? Because it factors all of those things in, right? And you go in and say, okay, production matters and athleticism matters, but how much? It varies for a center versus a corner versus a receiver. Athleticism matters for edges. It matters for corners, right? Not in a linear fashion, but it just matters. You want to be above certain thresholds. For offensive linemen, the data is pretty strong here. Those numbers don't matter, and you just cited terrible workout numbers for the guy that was the best center in the league for about 8 to 10 years, Travis Frederick. John Michael Schmitz is similar.
I will tell you, using that Ben Robinson grinding the mock site again, there are some mocks that have John Michael Schmitz reasonably far into the first round. So
get me in there.
It's not crazy.
So
there's also 2, by the way, that are dubbed fan ones, which I can only assume are errors or drug-induced hazes of some kind that have him what appeared to be quite far into the top 10.
Oh, those are fun.
Yeah.
You never know.
Which would seem to be crazy to me.
Yeah,
but,
look, it's just
but
people play around and make up stuff.
Sam Howell, never say never. Who
never
knows?
say never.
Maybe there's a team out there that has John Michael Schmitz as number 5 on their board, and we'll take him there.
And like I said, with all these, I would rather take all these players in the second round. I would rather trade down. If I'm forced to pick and all my favorite players are gone, my 25th pick, John Michael Schmitz to the Giants. Cowboys up at pick 26. I'm going Michael Mayer.
Stop it.
I've done this a couple times. What do you mean stop? Why do you hate Michael Mayer so much?
There's not a chance in hell that Dallas would pass on Bijan Robinson at pick number 26. Zero chance. None.
If I was in charge.
In the declarative world of never say never, they would never do that.
In my world, they would.
Steve Palazzolo would draft the tight end over Bijan.
Absolutely.
That's disgusting.
Absolutely, because Michael Mayer adding him to the mix now with Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb. Yes.
What does that do?
He's an upgrade. He's better than Dalton Schultz. He'll be better than Dalton Schultz pretty quickly at tight end as a pass catcher.
Dalton
Absolutely.
Schultz is pretty good.
No, he's not. He's a good number 4 option in a team that had good threes, good top 3.
How do you know Mayer is going to be better than that?
I'm projecting him as being good. Why are you so low on Mayer? Let's see. What
I don't think he's that good.
Let's see what the draft model says on him.
Let's see what the model says.
82nd percentile.
Okay.
Will draft. Combine stuff does matter for Mayer. He did not test well there. I've got him as a 60th percentile combine guy, but he's over 80th in production. So it weighs the value of those things and says, boom, 82nd percentile.
Okay.
The hit rate's pretty strong at tight end.
All right.
Trust in the data. The data doesn't like Luke Musgrave, for instance, despite a pretty good combine. It randomly likes Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is leapfrogging some dudes with an awesome combine, so it's weighing things properly here. There's a couple guys later that I like. I like Michael Mayer here, though. He's an option for the Cowboys. Complimentary. He's a stretch the seam, contested catch guy, and he's going to be a nice number 3 option in the pass game for the Cowboys.
All right.
Let's go off the rails a little bit here again for the Bills. Sometimes I cheat, and I like good fits. Ready? Mm-hmm. The Bills at number 27 are going Iowa linebacker Jack Campbell. The best linebacker in the draft is Jack Campbell from Iowa. 6'5", and look up his workout numbers if you can. I don't know what you're looking up right now, but Jack Campbell, where's he on the big board? Did you find him?
Well, that's why I was looking up his mock draft profile, which is skyrocketing right now. It's headed upwards from admittedly the...
It's going to go even further once
bottom.
Ben puts my mock into... He can put mine into his data.
Sure.
Which is fine. Don't put me in the predicting the mock draft contest, though.
Yeah.
I will come in last. I will purposely come in last because I'm doing what I would do. Jack Campbell is going to be your Tremaine Edmonds replacement in the middle of that defense. He's a good compliment to Matt Milano there. He is a monster at 6'5".
Yeah.
He moves well. He definitely looks like he can get exploited against some shiftier running backs, but who doesn't? But I'm talking tackling, run game, zone instincts, zone feel. He had an incredible pick 6 last year where he's weaving through the defense. He's just a good overall football player. And I think there's a draft, all these linebackers, the description for like the other 5 linebackers are like really fast and not very good, just unpolished players. And skinny or whatever. And Jack Campbell's old school throwback, 6'5", moves well enough and plays the game really well. He's the best linebacker in the draft.
He is, yeah. Like if you're an NFL coach that's kind of quietly lamenting the way the modern game has gone with these smaller, faster dudes that don't like contact and aren't going to stick their nose in, like if you're that kind of guy, you are going to be in love with what is effectively an old school prototype throwback of 6'5", 250 with speed, who can move. He's above the 50th percentile in every athletic measurable. The only thing he's not above the 50th percentile in his arm length, but like 40-yard dash was 61st percentile, and that's the lowest other thing he has. 10-yard split was 73rd. Short shuttle was 74th. 3-cone 96th percentile. Broad jump 96th percentile. So freakish athlete in addition to being prototypical size and shape.
What was his 3-cone? 6'7"?
6'7" which is the 96th percentile amongst linebackers. And that's all linebackers. So the guys that weigh 210 pounds, that's putting a 250-pound dude up against those guys and saying he's still the 96th percentile.
And was he 6'4" or 6'5" at the combine?
5.
So he's 6'5". I had to look in the database just for players who were 6'4" with a sub 6'8" shuttle or 3-cone. And only one guy appeared. That guy, Brian Peters, that I didn't even know existed for the Texans from the Brian Cushing era.
Right.
Who looked like, he looked like a strength coach who would, I don't want to accuse anybody. So I'm just going to say he had a look. And he was the only guy who was that height with a 3-cone, and he just never played football.
Yeah.
He looked like a strength coach. He looked like a guy who liked to work out.
A strength coach who may have dabbled in some supplements.
That's what I was going to say.
He happened to be in a linebacking core alongside Brian Cushing,
who did dabble with substances, with some
supplements.
With supplements, yeah.
So who knows what was happening there?
So I'm just saying, Jack Campbell, who looks all natural, is comped to random people in the database who,
But his grinding the mock thing is skyrocketing. We're seeing multiple expert mocks put him in the first round.
And so did I.
That being said, there's 3 of them like ... in a line, which may be the same expert doing it repeatedly, but who knows?
It's possible. All right, that brings up the Bengals at pick 28, and I actually considered Sam Laporta here at tight end. That's too high, though. I can't do that at this spot. I know a lot of people want to give the Bengals a tight end, a nice middle-of-the-field option with Jamar Chase. And
I've seen people giving them Washington.
Darnell Washington as the uber run block. I just want all those guys in the second round. I like Washington. I would take Washington. I just don't want to do it here.
Washington the first, to me, seems kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think there's probably a case for some of those edge defenders that everybody seems to be throwing at Kansas City. I think there's a play to be made here to add more depth there and some Trey Hendrickson insurance. There's not a lot of edges that I really love right now, though. The pick that I've been giving them for a while, though, DeJuan Jones, the big right tackle from Ohio State, in part because you root for the funny. So DeJuan Jones and Orlando Brown get to be on the same offensive line.
Hugely funny.
Yes, and now that spot, we're just continuing to shore up the offensive line that had depth issues last year, and I don't think we can attack it too much in Cincinnati.
I've always kind of wondered how useful it is having a sort of direct comp on your roster that can kind of teach you the tricks of being a giant fat dude who has to
just giant.
I mean, he's fat as well. Come on. It's not
heavy.
It's not
heavy.
words.
They're dense.
Well, they're deliberately carrying some fat. Joe Thomas was carrying fat, and then he lost it all once he didn't have to play football anymore, and now he's like a rail.
I'm carrying a lot of fat these days
for different reasons.
Yes,
I'm just saying it's not it's not unreasonable. But anyway, like, can Orlando Brown show him some tricks of the trade, or is that just complete fabrication?
No, I think you could. I like DeJuan Jones here. The lack of workout numbers hurt my my data a little bit. I think I have to project some things in there. Orlando Brown was also interestingly enough, the model really was in on Orlando Brown despite the combine.
Despite the catastrophic.
Yes. He was 80th percentile plus.
I was talking to the boss, Chris Collinsworth, earlier the other day in the office.
What are you name dropping?
He was saying that he really likes DeJuan Jones to the point where he thinks he could play left tackle. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen in Cincinnati because they just signed Orlando Brown.
What does that even mean?
So he's being seen as like that classic right tackle only, giant behemoth who can play right tackle and be fine. But he thinks you could draft that guy, kick him over to left tackle, and have your next Brian McKinney or whatever.
Of course you can. It's the same position, left and right tackle. It's different footwork, and as long as you can pick up the footwork, it's the same skill set. Orlando Brown just did it. He just went from right tackle to left.
He was a left tackle in college, right?
True. The risk here, though, is when you take a guy that has been a right tackle and just assuming the footwork. I mean, I would keep DeJuan Jones at right tackle. That is a compliment, though, the way Chris is using it. Right? He likes DeJuan Jones. So
yes.
It makes me feel better. The boss is in on DeJuan Jones as well. All right, Saints are up at 29. Again, top players available: Deonte Banks, the corner from Maryland; Brian Bresee, the defensive tackle from Clemson; Zay Flowers, Boston College; the receiver, Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas; and Will McDonald now in the top 5 by the public board. Will McDonald, the edge from Iowa State. I go off the rails a little bit here, too. I didn't love my Saints options, so I go a little bit further down the board, and Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback from Mississippi State. He weighs in the 160s.
Yeah.
So I don't think Cameron Dantzler has been bad since playing, but he's your most recent sub 170, right? Pounder.
He's not been good.
Yeah, he's been okay. Forbes is a playmaker, though. He is tenacious. He plays above his weight. He knows he has to. He is a playmaker on the ball. I think Emmanuel Forbes in this cornerback class, again, I'm taking him over Deonte Banks, who I love as an athlete. And you see the athleticism from Banks on the field for Maryland. I'm taking Forbes over Banks, though, at corner. And I think Forbes comes in, competes opposite Marshawn Lattimore, where they're not really locked in to Paulson Adebo or Bradley Roby there.
Were you at all concerned by his profile picture where he kind of looks like a 45-year-old guy who's seen some shit?
Yeah. I was a little concerned. You did send that to me. Is that...
There it is. Look on the screen.
Yeah. Is this going to be our next Mike McGlinchey?
I mean, maybe. That guy looks like he's been through some stuff,
How old is he officially?
He's probably not 42, which is what he looks like.
I always tell the story. My old teammate came from the Dominican. And when he came over, his name was Elvi Perez. And he was 17. And then one day, he became 22. And he became a different name. Became Olmo. He lied about his age, he said.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe there's some of that.
Well, there's a guy that Lazio...
We got him at 22.
22 years old. Yeah. There's this kid that Lazio had who was, I forget where he was from, but he was African of some kind, and they signed him at 17. And his profile picture looked a lot like that, and people flat out refused to believe that he wasn't 40 years old. And to the point where I think Lazio had to dive in and find birth certificates and stuff and prove that this 17-year-old was in fact a teenager, not a dude who was 35 on hard times and just somehow talked his way into a youth training system and signing for an Italian soccer team.
Absolutely amazing. So I'm going to go Forbes here. I mean, I think they could go defensive line, maybe the Will McDonalds or Felix Anduike Uzama. I think they could go that route. I value corner a little bit more. I know they brought in Alante Taylor last year. I don't love Taylor. I think Taylor could play slot a little bit more anyway than play outside. So I'm taking the shot here. I like to draft in volume at corner anyway. So Eagles are up. 2 more picks. Pick 30. This is where I'm going to go. Did I think about Bijan here? Yeah.
You better thought about Bijan.
I thought about Bijan here. I thought about it, but I'm not doing it. I'm going to Cyrus Torrence. So I'm taking the guard here for the Eagles.
Here's one where
step in and play and start.
So, we talked a lot about this. Like when you're talking about drafting a running back in the first round, number 1, contract. Well, what are we, 30? Pick number 30, contract is peanuts. Number 2, it's opportunity cost. And in this instance, your opportunity cost is bringing in a guard to probably start, but maybe not. Like they could theoretically kick out
Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, to play guard in the way they did with Landon Dickerson, who was a center and then kicked out to play guard while they were killing time waiting for Jason Kelsey to retire. So theoretically, the guy might not even start. But even if he does, number 1, is he going to be good right away? The last, giant interior guard was Kenyon Green by the Texans, who didn't exactly play very well. But even if he does, this is one where I think you can actually make a case that Bijan, as a running back, moves the needle more than the guard to come in and keep an offensive line in the best offensive line in the NFL kind of spot.
So I will agree. First off, Kenyon Green, why did he not work out? 50th percentile in the model. Osiris Torrance is 80th percentile. Hit rate's pretty solid for guards and centers here. So there's only 2 or 3 that I feel good about on the interior of the offensive line. I don't think the rest of the guards look great. I think the power that Osiris Torrance brings to the table fits the Eagles really well. And then I'll say, to your point about Bijan Robinson, as I've said many times here, it is attractive to me taking the best running back and putting him in an offense with a running quarterback. I do think we talk about force multipliers a lot, right? Where Tyreek Hill, is he a great receiver in isolation? Yes. But also the gravity that he brings as a deep threat, the accounting for him defensively, all of that stuff makes him probably way more valuable even than however we parse it out numbers-wise. When Derrick Henry was a free agent, and I said, I'm okay if the Ravens go get him, is there a tipping point there where if you do put a top 5 caliber running back with Lamar Jackson, with Jalen Hurts, with whichever running back or whichever running quarterback you have, with Anthony Richardson, do you actually double your benefit basically?
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I'm intrigued by that. It works both ways, right? Like Jalen Hurts in the running game with a really good offensive line, you could say that's going to create any running back. That's going to create production out of anybody. At the same time, if you put a good running back there, are you talking about Bijan's going to average 6 yards per pop, right? He's going to average 6 yards per carry. And when we talk about defenses accounting, how do you defeat blocks up front and account for Jalen Hurts and account for Bijan Robinson? You can at least have that discussion.
And I think, I think he will. If you draft a running back high in the draft and expect him to fix your running game, it's not going to happen. We saw that with Najee Harris. If you had a bad running game and you're like, well, Bijan's the best running back prospect we've seen come along since Adrian Peterson, he's going to come in here and transform everything. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. It really isn't. If your offensive line stinks, Bijan is not going to crush it. He's not going to dominate. However, if you already have the best offensive line in the NFL with a rushing threat at quarterback and an offense generally that is cooking on gas, I do believe that the difference between Bijan Robinson and another random running back is significant. The fact that he is potentially the best prospect to come along since Adrian Peterson makes that more valuable in a system that's already humming than it would be somewhere else. And I think it probably moves the needle more than just bringing in another starting guard who might not even be good right away, might struggle.
My data says otherwise.
Okay, but whatever.
I'm just kidding.
Whether he's good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not sure it moves the needle better than the guard or better than the running back. And I think you can definitely construct an argument that it makes sense. The opportunity cost makes more sense for them to go a different position at 10. Like, I don't think they draft him at 10. I don't think they will, and I don't think they should. At 30, though, I think it's pretty difficult to construct an argument that they don't draft Bijan at 30, particularly if the alternative is a guard.
With 2 picks, again, I'm more likely to take those chances. Really quick, though, we'll finish this in 5 minutes, right? A couple years ago, the Chiefs draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens with the running back stuff, other than, say, the Steelers, right? They draft Najee Harris, and we're just like, come on, man. Like, you don't have a good offensive line. That's not going to work. It hasn't really worked out, even though Najee's very good. With Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we started convincing ourselves, all right, they already have Tyreek Hill. They have Travis Kelce.
Sure.
They got all these weapons. Now you're adding a pass game weapon, right? And he'll run it, and he'll be a little bit better than what they have at running back as a runner, and a little bit better than what they have at running back as a receiver. And everybody in Kansas City thinks he's the next Brian Westbrook, who is an awesome pass-catching running back for the Eagles for Andy Reid. And we're all talking ourselves into why it's a fit. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, it's like, he's third on the depth chart. Jerick McKinnon's been more productive than him. 7th rounder, Isaiah Pacheco's been more productive than him. And what you thought was a marginal improvement didn't really matter, because the catalyst to that entire offense is not the running back, right? Is that a different argument than the Eagles? The catalyst for their offense is not the running back, right? They are the afterthought. They're just creating production because the offensive line and their receivers and Jalen Hurts make it all work. That is the risk associated with this. Even though you talk yourself into it, and Bijan's going to average 6 per carry, and he's adding something that Miles Sanders didn't have, is that marginal improvement worth it compared to the other places where you can improve your roster? That's the debate here, I think, for the running back stuff.
I think it's a different argument for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think generally we now tend to do that for the Chiefs in the same way that people used to do it for the Patriots. It's like, oh, you start projecting this guy's optimum scenario because suddenly he's gone to New England, where the Patriots way is taking these guys that are nobodies and turning them into superstars based off asking them to do the things they do well, not asking them to do the things they do badly. And so every player that New England signs, like, oh, this is going to be, like, this is just cheating. How do they keep doing this? Blah, blah, blah. I think we've reached that point now where any offensive player that the Chiefs sign, that's the narrative, right? They're going to turn Kadarius Toney into the next, whoever. Like, this is all crazy. Nuke Hopkins is going to go there. Everybody they sign, this is the story. And I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we lost the run of ourselves a little bit projecting what he could be within that offense. Number two, he never really was that guy, even in college, particularly as a receiver. Like, his running was pretty good, but I think we projected a lot what he could be as a receiver in this offense based off a few plays here or there, whereas actually his overall grading, even as a receiver, wasn't particularly good at LSU. And then number three, he just isn't the prospect that Bijan is. Like, never was. Like, they were not in the same realm of potential ability coming into the NFL. Bijan, at the very minimum, is right there with Saquon Barkley and Zeke Elliott, and maybe even better than that, and going back to Adrian Peterson in 2007. So you're talking about, like, literally the best running back we've seen enter the draft in 15 years.
Yeah.
Being plugged into an offense that's already the most running back friendly environment maybe in the NFL. Like, what does that value add on top of that?
You can convince me of him maybe here. I'm still coming of the mind that I love Bijan. He's great. I would rather have someone else. I'd rather let someone else take that guy right now. So you can convince me maybe for the Eagles at 30. All right, wrapping it up. Chiefs are on the clock. Pick 31. I'm going Zay Flowers here. So I'm going to take my 7th receiver on the board. I'm going to let him leapfrog some other guys because, as I said on the receiver show, I like Zay Flowers for the Chiefs.
And you're only taking him 5th, so it's not.
Yeah, he's my 5th receiver. It's not crazy. But I love his ability in space in an offense that's going to create space for him. Are the Chiefs a cheat code? Absolutely. And because I clicked that, there's the final. I don't get to list all the other guys that are.
I can give you them. Deontay Banks, Brian Brzee, Bijan, Will McDonald, Tanner McKee.
As I realized, I think there might be a bug.
Yeah.
I think it's only using the PFF board here instead of the public
Has Renner
board.
broken the
No,
data?
that's not the public board. That's He's not 32nd on the public.
No. That's what I mean. Is he like somehow infiltrated the back end of the mock draft sim just to ensure that Tanner McKee is always there?
His Tanner McKee love has gone to the point where he is hacking our system.
And then it's a bunch more of the defensive linemen. Mozzie Smith, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan, Bijay Ojulari, Felix Anadike Uzama, some of the linebackers, blah, 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 etc.
Yeah. So I took some players that probably should go in the second, but I think the remaining players, Deonte Banks probably goes in the first for Maryland, right? Bresee, I don't know if I'm convinced he's definitely a first rounder. I don't love it. I don't love the group here. It's not that I don't love. I just think they're clustered, right? I mean, the whole draft, this happens a lot, right? Picks 15 through 50. Is there really a big difference between them? Not really. So that's my mock. Mock it all you want, but that's what I would do. Given the circumstances I was placed in here today.
But you placed yourself in those circumstances.
I did, which made it really tough.
You're the architect of your own demise.
Yeah, when I'm picking at 30, it's like, man, there's 29 other players that I would prefer that are already off the board. It's not usually like that. There's, only 20 or so that you would have preferred in real life. So that's it. Steve's mock, if I was the GM. I don't know if this is good or bad, but Walt agrees. Walt thought it was a good mock for a while. He agreed with some of the picks.
You rode yourself.
So it's never good.
Shaky at the end.
Anyway, this was a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's Mock Draft Monday. We'll get you doing one. We'll do a fan one again.
So we have 3 more after this?
Yeah, I think so.
3 more mocks, one of which will be a live kind of chat box mock.
I think we should do alternate picks.
But email us in suggestions as well. We'll come up with some stuff. If you can come up with something you think we should do from a mock draft standpoint for the 2 more that will be remaining outside of things that are going to happen, email us in, nflpodcast@pff.com. Let us know what type of mock we should do. There's only 2 more of these.
All right. So I think, we'll talk about those. So a couple more mock drafts. And this week, you'll have Renner here Tuesday and Friday. I'll be back Wednesday. We'll have Jim Nagy on the show. And then Thursday, we'll do some cornerback rankings. It's a big week here in the PFF NFL podcast.
Yep.
So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow and the rest of the week.